Everybody's ready? Welcome to the July 11th Newmarket Planning Board meeting. Please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. First is public comments. Are there any public comments for anything that is not on the agenda? Hearing none, I'll close the public comments at 7:03. Acceptance of minutes. We don't have the minutes, so we'll continue that to the next meeting, Bart.
Yep. What?
I sent it out, but it wasn't in the email, so who's gonna punch it?
Oh,
We'll put that off to the next meeting.
okay. Fine.
Okay. First on the agenda is presentation and discussion with Phil Nazaro, Capital Improvement Program Committee Chair, on modifying the capital improvement plan process. It's nice that this is the way I get to see you.
Oh my God, my neighbor and I barely see them in. Is this on? Are you hearing me?
Yep.
Okay. So, like the chair said, Phil Nazaro, Raymond Lane. I'm here as the chair of the Capital Improvement Committee, which I sit on with Jane and several other individuals. I am the school board representative on that committee, but serve as the chair at this time. So, as a committee, and I served on this committee back when I was on the council like over a decade ago, and we really have not changed a lot about the way the committee has operated. It has always felt a little bit like an annual sort of rush just to approve budgets, and ultimately it has felt as if it's sort of like a branch of a financial request process as opposed to a long-term planning process in support of the master plan, which is what the capital improvement plan and the committee is supposed to be actually doing. So the idea that we had is how can we take what has been a collaborative effort between the town and the school and find a way that, as opposed to us, not arbitrarily, but just based on our judgment saying, yeah, that's a good project, let's go ahead and fund that. We suggest funding that, and then it goes to the town manager, it goes to the council, and either it gets funded or it doesn't. How can we ensure that what we are doing is actually a plan that is in support of the master plan and helping us really prioritize the projects that are in the capital improvement plan, which then would allow us to start annually looking at capital reserve fund requests in alignment with the plan. Functionally, all we've done up to this point is have capital reserve request reviews and not actually a coherent, integrated plan in support of our community goals. So the idea here today is to really propose a closer collaboration with the planning board to ensure that what we are approving as a capital improvement committee and hopefully creating into a more coherent single plan as opposed to a bunch of budget requests is in alignment with the master plan and the goals of the planning board and the community. So how do we propose to get there? Next slide, sorry. We'll burn through the slides here.
Yeah, this one right here or next one?
Yeah, so our vision, like I said, is a coherent, integrated, long-range capital improvement plan that's aligned to the goals of the master plan. So what we think this really requires is that we need a physical, or digital plan that actually is separate from the capital reserve requests, which is what we have done up to this point. In order to do that, though, I think our committee really needs a deep understanding of community goals. We have a town council rep, we have a planning board rep, Jane, we have a school board rep, and we have empty at-large positions. We have a budget committee rep. But at no point is there really this coherent single plan and this set of community goals that I understand there's a master plan rewrite going on, or it's about to go on, that will help provide that. That's going to allow us to, one, build a plan according to that, and then track and maintain and track progress of that plan, and then separate from that have the funding proposals that we work on. So, yep, you can go. Oops, sorry. Really, the next, I'm just here. One of the things I was going to ask for is insight on the goals. Obviously, you have a capacity crowd here. I'm assuming they're not here to hear about the Capital Improvement Committee plan, but want to talk about other items on the agenda, so I don't want to take up too much time tonight. Just that right now what we want to propose is that, one, ensure our plan moving forward is that, one, try to build a stronger relationship with you all. Two, create a greater opportunity for the community to have voice in proposed capital projects. So we're working on what that process is going to look like. And three, the CIP committee, really, our perspective, if we could find a way, and I know it's later on the agenda, talking about the master plan rewrite, to have at least a voice in that process, I think it would be important, as really recognizing that we have a unique function to serve in support of long-term vision of this community. So this year, what we're trying to do, we have historically just met for like a month in August to like hurriedly get budget requests in. We are spanning the fiscal year now in our meetings. Right now, we are currently looking for, I think the town's already asking department heads to review their current plans and ask for any proposed new ones, which we should not be getting all these new plans all the time. It should be a maintenance of a long-term plan. So there should be few and far between additions that we then would have to make decisions as to, do the additions tell us to stop or pause other work, or is it in addition to other work? We then would create edits to that plan. I think we would like to get that in front of this group, this board, ensure that the board understands the plan that we are putting together to propose the funding for, so that the planning board has a voice inside of it. And then hopefully moving out in future years, based on the rewrite of the master plan, we're gonna be able to stay just in closer alignment to what those master plan goals are.
Excellent. Thank you,
Questions,
Phil.
thoughts?
Yeah, anybody have any questions?
Not a question, but just a point of, in the past, I've been on the capital committee for about 10 years. And a lot of times, I can tell you that every member in that board has worked diligently and takes it to heart about the goals and aspirations for the town and to help us with our capital planning. But I will say this new approach that Phil and Bart have come up with is something that will help streamline the process. It will get us out of a reactionary method and it will put us in a more proactive method. It aligns the resources and it gives us a vision that maps back to the master plan as the master plan develops, right, and matures. I want to make sure, I know I've said that in our little planning board meetings, but I want to make sure the community as a whole hears this. This work that these two gentlemen have done for this brand new process, because now we have a new chairman, we have a new planning person in town, has really stepped up, and I want to make sure that I state that again strongly, that what a great job these guys have done, and I'm really looking forward to the new process, and I'm looking forward to the more proactive approach. So, congratulations.
It's a group
Thank you,
effort,
Jane.
but thank you.
Phil, are you going to have a document for us to look at, or how do you
Yeah,
envision
so I
this
just
going
we
forward?
wanted to come and just present the idea, right, to y'all. Like, I think that this year, we're basically already at like the fiscal year,
Right.
starting to build those. So we are trying to step into it, that like right now how we can build, so right now he's getting those requests and like we're trying to just build a more coherent plan now. But ultimately we will try to get to a full-on document that will get reviewed by this group of our capital plan. Right now, all the documents we have are budget requests. We don't have like a document of like, here is the plan and here's how it supports the goals.
Okay. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, and just add to that one part of that, we think maybe a good, I think Phil mentions this, is put it into the master plan, like an implementation. And every year the plan board, CIP committee comes to the plan board and assess, all right, what have we achieved this year to check off the boxes in our master plan, where do we want to go? And then that kind of gives directions to the town as well.
When you look at the RSAs, we would, like, if we didn't exist, the planning board would be doing
Right.
this work, right? Like, not the finance, the budget committee, which is the way we're acting up to this point. So,
Absolutely.
awesome. So we should have a document for you all for later summer, early fall to see that will be just a draft as to like what this will look like.
Like an outline, what it'll look
Yeah.
like. Perfect.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Appreciate
Thank
your
you,
time.
Phil.
Thanks.
Thank you, Phil.
Alrighty, next on the agenda. Pursuant to RSA 676:4 and Appendix A subdivisions, Appendix B site plans, and 32-236 affordable elderly housing of the municipal code of the town of Newmarket, New Hampshire. Notice is hereby given that a public hearing shall be held for an application filed by D.R. Lemieux Builders LLC requesting minor subdivision, major site plan, and special use permit approval for a proposed development seeking to create a split lot subdivision with the original lot, 0.54 acres, retaining existing single-family housing unit, and the new lot, 7.22 acres, constructing a 32-unit age-restricted multifamily development with associated utilities, parking, landscaping, and stormwater mitigation infrastructure located on real property with an address of 242 South Main Street, tax map U4, lot 69 within the R2 zoning district. Before we begin, Mikhail, I'm going to appoint you to sit in. Tim's not here tonight. All right.
I would like to recuse as to said survey as the surveyor record on the project.
Okay. Go ahead, Deb.
I would like to disclose that I have in the past represented this applicant in my business. I have no financial interest in this project, nor would I ever, given the nature of the project. So, but I did want to ask if the applicant has any objections to me hearing this application, or if any of the board members do.
So for the record, my name is FX Bruton. I'm with Bruton and Barabee. I represent the applicant. We don't have any objections.
I have no objection. Any board members have any objection?
No objection.
Okay, great. All right, so before we get going too much here, we need to, the first step in this process is to accept the applications as complete or to not accept them as complete. So Bart has provided us the applications and the checklist. Do you have a recommendation, Bart, as far as the applications go?
The applicant has submitted all the requisite documentations to be considered a complete application, in my opinion.
Okay, so would it be, should we accept each one individually, or are they all part of the same package?
So it's all part of the same package, so you accept, so you can just roll into one motion. You accept the application for minor subdivision, major site plan review, and special use permit.
Okay. Do any board members have any questions on the application itself?
Does the applicant want us to hear them as all one or individually?
We,
So you basically have three separate one application, but three separate.
right, we'd like to have you hear them all singularly as one.
So when
As
it comes to time to make the board make a decision,
Right.
we'll have to close each one and then vote on each one.
Yes.
Okay, but
we
hear
would
them
agree.
concurrently.
Yeah, you hear them concurrently.
Oh, okay.
Me? Oh, sorry. It's a bigger room, obviously, so I will
Is
try.
that just going to channel 13?
I
I think so,
appreciate
yeah. I'll
that.
double check with Tim.
Okay. Hold on 1 minute, FX. Let's see if we can fix
Can
this.
the members hear the panel of the board?
Can you hear us fine?
I forgot my hearing aids.
Technical difficulties, they're working on it, so it should resolve itself soon.
Val will take
I think,
Jeff's microphone.
I don't know if my voice is being amplified. I think it
Can't
is
hear
now.
Val,
It
but you
wasn't
can take Jeff's
previously.
one.
They can.
Does that sound better?
I'm gonna let Tim work on that.
I'll speak up.
There you go.
I'll speak up.
Want him to give it a try? Give it a try, FX. See what.
Test, I guess, right? Is that better? Doesn't sound like it's better for us, but maybe for the people at home, obviously, they need to hear it. But I'll speak up, but I'm assuming they can, oh, here we go. All
That's
right.
better. Okay, so what he said was he wants us to hear all three applications as one, at one time. Concurrently, we'd have to vote on each one individually, but we'll hear them all at the same time.
So,
Sometime. So back to do any board members have any questions on the application, the completeness of the applications? So the first step is if we have no questions and Bart recommends we accept them, if we're comfortable with that, I will entertain a motion to accept the applications as complete, so then we can open up a public hearing and start the process.
So moved.
Is there a second? Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion on accepting the applications as complete? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
And then the next is regional impact. If vote on that, if it is considered a application of regional significance, and I'll
And-
get to that.
Right, and your review of the application indicated that it was not.
Right, but I want to just bring up the the criteria, recommended criteria, for everyone to see. Let me just find it, hold on a second. So, yeah, I can't find it right now, I saved it, but, really, you know, is it gonna impact the traffic regionally? Is it gonna affect, environmental conditions regionally, so abutting towns, stormwater, you know, regional sewer, or there isn't, but like sewer water, so is there any aspect of this application, that will impact the region as a whole? So 32 unit affordable, elderly affordable housing unit on a 7-acre lot in the middle of town. More so.
So do we need to vote on that?
Yes.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions, I guess, to Bart?
What's triggering
Relative
this,
to-
this vote for regional impact versus the, other development on 152?
I'm not sure of that, but I'm just checking all the boxes right now that,
Is it the number of units?
yeah, the board needs to make a decision. It's not necessarily a trigger. It's like you review what the application is, what it's proposing, and make a judgment call almost, whether this application is going to impact
Right.
regional municipalities. So based on the elements of the application, you know, would it be reasonable to say that it will or will not impact?
Right, no, my question was more that it hasn't come up in prior applications. That's why I didn't know if this was a certain trigger. Like
Should
on
we
the
be-
Cheney application, it didn't come up.
Should we be doing this all the time?
Yes,
Okay.
So
what's
for the last
process?
yes,
20 years, we haven't been doing our job there.
right.
Okay.
Good to
Well,
know.
not that, but like just,
Well, what's the trigger?
Yeah, exactly.
right.
Exactly.
And
Okay.
it's really, we can go into it later, but it would just be for right now, going through that vote to see in the board's.
Well, we're typically voting on that if it's a project that's abutting another community.
Right, and also it has impacts on, it can delay a decision more. So instead of 65 days, it turns into 90-day,
Right.
so, decision for the board.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm certainly comfortable that if this project were to be approved, it's not gonna have any regional impact. It's basically be, whatever impacts it will would be within the town. Hold on.
Wait till,
Wait till we get to a point.
right,
Okay,
yeah,
so you're not making a decision before hearing?
correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does that, how's the board feel?
I mean, again, I don't recall this coming up before, so I'm not as familiar with it, but I mean, the only question I have is it's because the project is taking place on a state highway, right? It is a state highway at that point, isn't it?
No, it's,
It's under our jurisdiction.
Not?
it's urban compact.
It's right before
Yes.
it becomes the state highway?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep,
That
we're-
would have been my question, yeah, because obviously this is a place where people are traveling both from Lee and Epping are coming through this exact intersection.
No. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, if it was on state highway, they'd have to go get a state highway access permit. But they're
no,
on
I
our
mean,
portion of
as
the
far
town.
as a regional impact, I don't know if that's something that should be taken into account because of its location
I
on
think-
this particular road. It is a
I don't believe
regional
so.
pass-through, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more, like, I would think of it as like, will this development impact Durham, Epping, Newfields? Like, think of it that way, instead of, you know, there could be, you know, we're gonna review it, the board's gonna review it, but the traffic, you know, concerns that may have. Just think it, like, you really need to think about it as, will this development affect neighboring communities?
And then the notification is to the regional planning commissions in the particular abutting towns?
Right.
Okay. So they will have a traffic engineer with a traffic study at some point outlining what the traffic impacts will be,
Okay.
I assume. Is that correct, FX?
They have
Yes,
that-
that's
that's
correct.
submitted.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, to me, this has no regional impact. It's not gonna impact Epic, not gonna impact Durham, not gonna impact Newfields. Whatever impacts that may occur would be basically within town. And there'd be a little bit more traffic on 152. I said there would be more traffic on 152. A little bit, exactly. Exactly. Anybody, any board members have anything else to say? Want to make a motion, Val?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that it is the opinion of this board that this particular application does not constitute requirements for regional impact notification.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay.
Oh, abstain.
One abstention. Okay. Anything else, Bart?
Waivers, are there any waivers being requested at this point?
No.
No waivers. Okay. So now I'll open up the public hearing.
Accept the application now.
Oh, we did?
Did you make a motion?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, we did.
my apologies.
Yes.
Yes.
Alrighty, so now I will open up the public hearing. And I see the applicant's representative, Mr. FX Bruton here. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board, members of the community as well. My name is FX Bruton. Can everyone hear me? So I'll keep up the volume. I'm with Bruton and Barabee in Dover, and I'm here to represent the applicant. We have a number of people here that are going to give you some brief information. They're here as well if you have any questions, obviously. And we want to give you a full sense of their expertise, but they're not going to, verbatim recite their reports that you've been provided. But nonetheless, we're here, and so I'm going to give you a list of who's here and what you would expect. The structure for me is I'm going to ask them to kind of go through the technical aspects, and then I'm going to go through the criteria for the special use permit. We would like to go to TRC after this meeting. We'd like to ask that you vote on the special use permit tonight, and then deal with the technical issues at the TRC and obviously come back to you. As you know, we were in front of this board a few months ago on a design review basis, and we got some good information. We got a lot of information from the abutters and the neighbors. We got a lot of information from this board as well. We think you'll see that we've tried to incorporate that in our designs and our approach to this project. The reason we have so many people that I'm going to list is because we brought together a lot of people to really consider this project and produce the best project that we can. So with me tonight is Dave Lemieux and Heather Dresch of representing the applicant, DR Lemieux Builders, Christian Smith of Beals and Associates, Jim Gove of Gove Environmental, Jeff Dirk of the Ness Traffic Engineer, Brian White is an appraiser. He's going to provide some testimony. Robbie Woodburn is a landscape architect from Woodburn and Company, and she's going to provide some detailed insight as to our landscaping designs. Sarah Horahan and Mihao Coletta are here from LaSalle Architects, and they'll be providing us with some information in terms of how we got to what we got in terms of the elevations and the architecture. So I think you'll get a full, complete package. It sounds like a lot. I'm going to suggest to you respectfully that this is somewhat of a simple project in a sense, even though there are these components to it. And I say that because this is a project that is affordable senior housing, elderly housing. It's 32 units, as you know, on 7 acres. We spent a lot of time looking at where this project would be positioned. We spent a lot of time looking at the environmental aspects and being respectful of those. And we think you would, as a board, appreciate that. We spent a lot of time in terms of building orientation, so I'm going to let the better professionals talk about that. We did that with the concept in mind of twofold. One is adhering to the requirements within the special use permit vis-a-vis the size and mass bulk and the view from the streetscape, but also recognizing this is going to be a community of seniors and we want them involved in the community as well. So we're prepared to work with the board to build the green wall, if you will, but we don't think that's appropriate, and we hope you don't as well, because we're not trying to build a prison. We're trying to build a beautiful facility for the elderly, one that's affordable as well. It's interesting that your requirement only requires that 75% of the units be affordable. 100% in this case will be affordable. And so I think when you get through all of what we're going to present, you'll see that we either meet or exceed the requirements that are set forth within your special use permit. We comply with all zoning requirements, and we believe we comply with all of your special use permit criteria. Again, in terms of why is this simple, it's simple because what we've done is we've looked at your zoning, and your zoning with particular purpose and thought, not only by this board, but by the town itself, the town folk, have created very limited areas where these kinds of projects can exist. This is one of them. This is very limited in terms of what roads you allow this to be on, very limited in terms of requiring town water and sewer, which we have. Very specific criteria were created by this board through your zoning process to adopt this particular criteria, and we believe we meet that criteria, and that this project is indicative of what was envisioned when this board and the town folk voted to create these kinds of opportunity for the elderly. So we're hopeful that that is what we've done. I'm going to have Christian Smith of Beals come up, and he's going to go through some of the engineering aspects of the project, and then we'll have the slides that we presented in our packet, all of them be explained by the appropriate personnel, and then I'll come back and I will quickly address the criteria, because I think those professionals will really do a better job of explaining how we meet all that criteria. But nonetheless, I'll go through that and wrap it up from our perspective, and then obviously you'll hear from the neighborhood and go from there. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. As FX discussed, Christian Smith, engineer with Beals Associates, representing the applicants on the project. I'm trying to orient this so the camera can get it. I was instructed to do that by your AV guy. So essentially, I'll try and be brief as I possibly can. We have a 7.22 acre parcel here after the subdivision, which simply carves out the existing home on the property on a legally conforming parcel. And with that, the calculation, because we can use 25% of the poorly drained soils, would be that this property would allow 39 units based on your zoning criteria for density. And Mr. Lemieux has chosen to simply go with the 32. It fits better. There was contemplation initially utilizing perhaps this large upland island over here, but decided he would prefer not to cross the wetlands to do that, and just stuck with the 32 units, so kind of left 7 units on the table according to your zoning. And we provide the requisite parking. We've got 34 spaces proposed, So that's 2 greater than what is needed according to the code. And we are providing 4 handicap stalls, which is, again, 2 more than ADA would require for the project. You can see the location of the proposed driveway. It has adequate sight distance in both directions. And in addition to that, I'll go now down to a larger scale presentation plan here. Make sure that's still pointing over there. And what we've provided, we met with DPW and the town engineer on a number of occasions, as well as planning beforehand. And what they determined is they felt that it would really be best to create a sidewalk, crosswalk situation here that connects with the existing sidewalk on the opposite side of South Main Street from where the project is. And everybody was concerned about the speed of traffic out through here. I know Jeff Dirk will certainly touch on that during his presentation. But we worked with Vanessa, and basically we're proposing the RRFB stop sign crossings, which are very similar to what you see downtown with the warning lights and all of that. And signs will be placed 125 feet either side of that for oncoming traffic to be warned that is where the crossing takes place. We have provided a system of 2 bioretention ponds, both equipped with sediment forebays as pre-treatment, and then a rather large stone drip edge for the roof runoff in the rear of the building. And running through the latest and current drainage calculations or drainage criteria with our calculations, we actually demonstrate that we're not only reducing the peak flow, but we're reducing the peak runoff volume of every storm from the 2-year up to the 100-year storm, which is pretty significant, considering what the proposal is here. And with that, we have also provided, and we went to the company formerly known as Sharon to do the lighting design. They're professional lighting engineers. You can see those luminaires here. And it's very adequate for the safety of the folks on site. And then at the property line, we are looking at virtually 0 lumens, which is obviously the desire of both the applicant and requirements in the code. The property will be serviced by municipal water and sewer. We have gone through some preliminary discussions with DPW on that as well. And the appropriate erosion controls are, intended to be put in place. The temporary ones will be there until everything's stable, and then the permanent ones will remain, which are largely the stormwater features and the drip edges in the back of the building. And I think with that, again, I'm trying to be as brief as I can here. I will turn the commentary over, and I believe Jim Gove is coming up next. Jim, I'll give you the overall.
Sure. So, Jim's going to talk about some of the environmental aspects. One of the things we talked about at our preliminary design review was siting of the building. There was some discussion with respect to portions of the back of the property. What we really want to do, what the applicant wants to do, is really protect that whole area. Protect the neighbors on the adjoining parcels that are towards the rear. So we took a lot of thought into where we would end up. And Jim's going to talk about all of those factors from a wetland scientist perspective in terms of why we are where we are. Thank you.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Jim Gove with Gove Environmental Services. The issue that comes up when we're talking about not using the front parcel, but trying to utilize the island in the rear, is the fact that we would end up with a wetland impact. Now, we would end up with a wetland
Jim, hold on
impact.
one second.
Sure.
The people in the audience can't hear you again. Just, can you lean a little bit closer to the mic or maybe speak a little bit louder if you could?
It didn't zip.
Is that better?
All right, I don't know, does it?
Yeah.
All right. So the difficulty associated with going to the upland island is that will cause a wetland impact. There will in fact be the need to have a rather substantial crossing of the wetland. And under Wetlands Bureau's rules, and in particular we're talking about ENB WT 31107, we have to make sure that we first go through avoidance, minimization, before we can actually impact a wetland. Now, the term avoidance means that not impacting areas if there's a practicable alternative to the proposed project would have less impact. Well, obviously, at this point in time, we have no impact to the wetlands. And in fact, if we now tried to say we don't want to have the building there and we want to move it to the back, we would be essentially creating a situation where we would be not being able to avoid per their criteria. So, quite frankly, we would be denied. That application would be denied because we have not demonstrated avoidance and minimization. This plan that we have before us clearly shows we can build this project as it's been designed with no wetland impact at all. So to then go and say, well, guess what? Now we want a wetland impact would basically create a situation where we would be denied because we have not met the criteria of avoidance and minimization. So that's the aspect of why we have the building where it is, because that's where it fits best. The second aspect of that too is simply fragmentation. If we want to talk about the fact that we have a large upland area surrounded by wetlands with a floodplain in the back, we have a fairly nice looking wetland area. I have been back here, I've looked at that wetland, I've looked at the upland. It is a very nice habitat area. And it will continue to be a habitat area as long as it's not fragmented by having a building there. So from a wildlife perspective, I would say that it is well situated. The other question that came up, I understand, is the concept of the priority resource area and where it actually is. Now, priority resource area is a very specific thing. In other words, you can't just say, oh, that looks like a nice wetland, I think we should call it a priority resource area. Well, that's not the case. It has very specific criteria. In this case, under ENB 30166C, we're talking about a floodplain wetland contiguous to a Tier 3 or higher water course, which of course is the staff. And that floodplain resource is limited to the actual area of Zone A on the FEMA map. It does not extend any further into the property other than at that Zone A line. So that is the area which is considered to be the priority resource area, and as you can see, we're well away from it. I did do the flagging out here, I did do the soil mapping out here, and if there are any other questions regarding this, I'll be glad to answer them, but for right now, I think these are the issues I needed to answer, right? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're going to dance around the sign all night. We are going to get to the building itself. We're proud of what we've produced. But one of the main issues is going to be basically the buffering between that building, the project, and the neighborhood. So we thought it would be best to kind of hit that first, and then we can kind of talk about what's behind the building, the landscaping, if you will. So I'm going to have Robbie Woodburn come up next.
I'm going to have this explode, but I'm going to move it to the side. So, my name is Robbie Woodburn. I'm a landscape architect. I'm from Woodburn and Company. My office is about 100 feet that way. So, you know, being on the planning board, you see landscape architects come up here all the time, generally make the plans look better. In this instance, in addition to making the plans look better, we also are assisting in meeting the criteria of special use requirements. And of course, it's the buffer, right? I think this particular image to my left here is a very important image in that it shows the building and how it's oriented to the street, but it also shows how much natural woodland buffer is behind and to the side of the building. So the residences that are back and behind the site have up to 300 feet of woodland there, which is an excellent buffer. So in addition to those residences, obviously there are the residences across the street, and there's the view from the street that needs to be buffered. So how do you buffer, right? There are many ways to give a landscape buffer, one of which is to do a green wall of evergreens along that street, and you'll never see the building, but you'll also never see the residents, and there'll be no connection between the residents and the community itself. You can do a mixed buffer planting. You can do a mixed buffer planting with berm. We talked long and hard as a team as to how to approach this and what was most appropriate to provide that buffering, and we are certainly ready to listen to input from the board, but this is our presentation in terms of what we think is best. We've done a mixed border along the property line that's 10 feet deep. It's 2 to 3 layers of shrubs that vary in height and vary from evergreen to deciduous. The front row is somewhere around 3 to 4 feet in height. The back row is somewhere around 4 to 5 feet in height, depending on which shrubs are there. In addition, we've got deciduous trees that we're starting in at 3 inches in caliper, which is a fairly significant tree. They are roughly 38 feet on center, which is close. Those trees consist of sweet gum, American sweet gum, which is a native. It looks like a maple and has really good fall color, and it gets a lovely crown. And there's a couple of zelkovas at the entrance. We've got, we also have trees surrounding the parking lot, of course, to provide shade and cut down on glare. But I think the key element here is this buffer planting that we've got out front. This is not an evergreen wall, but it is a repeating pattern of trees with mixed layers of shrubs, evergreens, and deciduous below. Bart, can you scroll forward to image 55 and 56 of the PDF? Oh, it's way at the end.
Yeah, I'm at the end.
Oh. Did you get the renderings?
Landscape.
Yeah, please.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hold on a second. Yeah, let me find them. I do have those.
Sorry for this.
It's okay.
I think
Hang
it's
right here.
important to show.
Fair.
So by orienting the building short end to the street and back into the site, you can see it in this image coming from the west. You're looking at the entrance. You'll see our proposed trees along the street line and our buffer that is not at full height, but it's close. It softens the building. It softens the cars when you are directly across the street. Those shrubs are high enough to knock out the headlights, and we think that's important. And provides a good screen in front of the building. It does not hide the building, but it softens it and softens its character with regard to the surrounding development. The special criteria talk about reducing the bulk of the buildings and minimizing conflicts with surrounding residences, which I think this does. However, I want to make very clear that if the board does not feel that this is enough, we will listen to that. It's the one thing that we've come forward with. I think it's important, especially when they talk about the criteria of enhancing the compatibility with the town. I think that's not only how it looks on the street, but how it integrates the life of the residents in and out of the site, which is an important thing. I think someone was talking about we don't want to, build a prison here. We want to have the people here and the building be part of the neighborhood. So it's a fine line that we're trying to balance here between enough screening and softening of the development, but also providing something good looking from the street. So I'd be happy to answer any questions we have.
Thank you. No,
Yeah.
hold it for later, okay?
So we're going to talk about the building now. We're going to talk about not only the elevations, but what's inside as well, how it fits within this community. And in order to do that, we're going to bring two architects up, Sarah Horahan and Michal Kaleta, are going to talk about their specific input that they have with respect to that. So I'll ask them to come up now.
Good evening. I'm Sarah Horahan from Lasso Architects, and I'm here with Michal Kaleta as well. So when we first started looking at this project, we looked at a few different options for orienting the building. We had one option that was horizontal or parallel to the street, but what we arrived at was by rotating the building, we were able to reduce the bulk of the building and what you see visually coming down the street by having the shorter end front the street. And so that's what you see here. And then the rest of the building just kind of falls away. So visually for the neighbors across the street, they're looking out to the field. For people that are driving down the street, they're also seeing out to the field. And it's just reducing the overall size and mass that's along the streetscape. One of the things by having this edge orient towards the street, we're engaging the community that's nearby. We have a very similar size footprint for other buildings in the area that you may see along that street. When you enter the building, we have a farmer's porch here that's oriented towards the parking lot, so it provides residents some covered outdoor space to hang out and be part of the community. We also have a common room here for the residents to use. This common room would have a kitchenette. It's fully accessible. Those doors open up to the front yard. So we really want this space to be engaged, for them to be part of the community, to be able to have access to the sidewalk, and to bring a liveliness to the street the same way that other houses along that road bring that character to the neighborhood. So we have 32 one-bedroom units here, 3 stories. Well, actually, it's a 2-story building with a 3rd floor that's in the attic space under eaves. And you'll see when we get to the elevations that we've looked to minimize the height of that building and the overall scale. And in our floor plans, we have shared laundry spaces. We also have sitting areas at the end of the hallway that would have glass doors and windows so the residents can walk the halls. There's natural light coming into the space. There's alternate seating areas or just spaces if somebody wants to go and read a book that's not in their room, they have that there. We have a grand stair as the front entry, and that's something that we felt was very residential for that area and making it feel more like a home versus just a standard affordable apartment building. So there's been a lot of features in the plan that we've tried to incorporate to make it feel more residential. Elevations. Yeah. So in elevation, this would be the street side here. As you can see, we have our 2-story form, and then that 3rd floor sits under the eave here. And we've used colors on the third floor especially so that the siding blends in with the roof, just again to visually minimize the height of this building and to allow it to fit in with the community a bit better. We've used precedent images throughout the community to design and stay within the character of what we feel is appropriate in this neighborhood. And the scale of the windows, the proportions that we're using, trim bands and materials are all in keeping from what we've found within this direct neighborhood. Let me see if there's anything else. I guess we could go to the renderings again. As it was mentioned before, this will be a passive house building, so this building will meet some of the highest levels of energy efficiency standards, which I think is really important to the community. We'll also have all night-friendly, dark sky compliant lights on the site so that there won't be light trespass or contribution to sky pollution. So as you can see with this rendering, we've kind of settled the building into the landscape, and working with Robbie, we really tried to not hide the building, but again, settle it in, kind of blend it in to the natural landscape that you see there. Again, you can see that we're minimizing what's along the streetscape by orienting the building the way that we have it, with the short end towards the street. And then that edge of the building is in keeping with other buildings within town that you've seen.
Just for clarification, is that more indicative of the color scheme proposed versus
Well,
the handouts?
So we actually had it rendered in two different colors. This is more of a clay option, and then I think we had a gray option, which is what you're seeing there. It's, we wanted to provide the community with some options that people felt might be more, what they feel comfortable with. One of the things that we like about this clay option is that it's really just this warm tone that will fit in with the surrounding landscape really nicely, but we're also open to the gray option. So we wanted to bring both of those tonight as color options. So again, we have clapboard siding, gable roof, shed dormers, again to help create that space on the third floor, but also give it the perception that it's really a two-story building with that attic space above. And we have trim bands at appropriate levels just to bring in that human scale. And then you can see the front farmer's porch off the edge here that fronts the parking lot. Let's see. Do you want to present your site plan rendering?
Talked about energy efficiency, but is this an LEED certified building?
No, this will be a passive house certified building, which is a different set of criteria. So LEED is one program, passive house is another one. And Mihal can talk a little bit more to passive house if you're interested in that as well. So, yeah.
Thank you. Perhaps let me start to answer the question about the LED and passive house standard. I oftentimes think that passive house exceeds LED, but that's not entirely true. Passive house just concerns itself with more aspects of the design, while LED is a bit more vague or basic. Both standards are great when it comes to the energy efficiency. To explain the passive house building standard is quite exciting to me, because that's what makes this project efficiency impact the quality of the design. Passive house is the ultimate energy efficiency standard, mostly tailored for big size buildings that impacts the insulation and air tightness of the building, also resulting in ultimate ventilation and natural lighting conditions into the building. Suffice it to say, those apartments will have plenty of natural light. Those apartments will have ultimate ventilation and space conditioning, will consume as least amount of energy as required in comparison to the code compliant building because they exceed the code compliance. They are highly insulated, they're perfectly oriented to the site to benefit from the solar heat gains, and they have increased insulation with increased building tightness. What was exciting to me as the person that models those buildings in energy efficiency software called Woofy is the fact that I was given the orientation of the building, as we've discussed. It's determined by what works best for the wetlands disturbance. But when I observed that we have our long site oriented towards west and east, my glazing gets the benefit of the solar heat gain coefficient without overheating. That's the first step. The orientation seems perfect already as it is when it comes to the energy efficiency of the building, and I was excited to find out that it was a given. Other than that, the simple aspect of us pursuing the passive house certification means that our building will exceed the code and take the quality of natural illumination, natural lighting, and ventilation of the building as one of the priorities. As a designer, that's quite exciting to me. Now, when it comes to the board we're presenting here, we've created it to show proximities to other similar sized developments and buildings in the area, as well as neighborhoods that are affected and adjacent. The closest similar use would be the, I have a hard time pronouncing it, but Wadley Falls Senior Housing. It seems we're just about half a mile away. It's a similar size development that is just a little bit up the road in a close proximity, showing that such development already exists in this neighborhood. We also have somewhat similar pines of Newmarket right here next to the elementary school. The elementary school itself is quite a sizable building itself, but just going down the street towards downtown, we find the Newmarket High School, I believe, already showing that buildings of such comparable size or greater exist already within that neighborhood. Just to the south of the Newmarket Junior High, we have a big community space, if I'm not mistaken. That open field not marked, that's the community space or a park. This sheet is there to allow this community to take a look at our development impact on the neighborhood, showing that similar buildings in size and nature already exist, and to determine the proximities to individual neighborhoods and discuss them. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a materials board, so if anybody is interested in viewing the samples, we can certainly have that here or passed around. And then just one other thing that we wanted to note, we've worked on several senior housing projects. We have one developer in the area who recently did an impact study on their parking, and they determined that they had a 0.59 ratio. So 0.59 cars per unit is what they determined was appropriate for their projects, and we recently used this in another local Seacoast project, and so they ended up putting in a 1-to-1 ratio parking count. 60% of those spaces are actually used on a daily basis. So, we feel pretty good that we have the right number of parking spaces for each of the units, as well as guest spaces. And so I just wanted to note that because it was something that we've been working with other senior housing developers on, and it's just important information that could be part of this project as well. So.
How do you plan to heat and cool the building?
It's early to determine, but
Excuse
Hold
me,
on,
Simon,
hold on.
just go to the mic.
thank you. It is very early to determine, and I cannot give you any answer that will be measurable and will guarantee. my preference in buildings such as this one is to either go full electric or mostly electric, which means heat pumps, as for the heating and cooling, as they're capable of doing both. If I would have to go into a tandem mode, I would use my heat pump for heating and cooling, and either electric baseboard or a gas-powered baseboard as a supplementary. My preference would be a heat pump to provide a full electric building with zero carbon footprint produced into the air.
Thank you.
One of the issues we talked about at the last meeting was traffic, and so we're going to have Jeff Dirk of Vaness come up and talk to you about his report, which the board has.
Bart, if you wouldn't mind, if you could pull up the overall site plan.
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Chair. Perfect, thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is Jeffrey Dirk. I'm the managing partner with Vanessa and Associates, and I think, as you heard, we're the transportation consultants for the project. You do have a traffic study or a traffic impact study as a part of the record for this project. And basically what we're looking at from the standpoint of assessing the impacts of this project is the, number one, quantify the amount of traffic the project's going to generate. But I think importantly, the other aspects are to look at the impacts of this project as it relates to the roadway network. And in this area in particular, we know we have the school across the site, across from the project site. So unlike what we would look at in a traditional traffic study or transportation assessment for a residential project, in this area, of course, we're concerned with how this project impacts traffic flow during the school commuter peak or the school peak hours as well. So what you see presented in the impact analysis is a look at your traditional commuter peak hours, so the morning time period when people are going to work, the evening time period when people are coming home from work, and then a midday time period, generally centered around the time period when the school would be letting out. There was an overlap in school traffic during the commuter peak hour, so we captured that in an analysis of that time period. And then, as I said, we added that third analysis period to look at how the project relates to that school-related traffic. So as we're looking at existing conditions in this area, and we measured existing conditions during a weekday, actually over 3 days. So it's not just a one-day snapshot, it was 3 days during the week. And we looked at a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, essentially, to capture that time period. We're looking at volume of traffic. We're also looking at speed of traffic. Speed of traffic as it relates to the site distances and the placement of our driveway, but also important, the crossing that's proposed as you see in the plan here. So in terms of traffic volumes, the existing volume of traffic in this area on Route 152 accommodates about 6,900 vehicles per day. So that's two-way traffic on a weekday. If you measured all the traffic over 24 hours, that's the number that you'd arrive at. About 10% of that traffic occurs during any of the peak hours of the day. So you're looking at somewhere just shy of about 700 vehicles on the roadway during a 1 hour period, morning, afternoon, and in the evening. The predominant traffic flow in the morning is eastbound, so it's heading away from the project site easterly. And then in the evening, and actually in the midday as well, it's westbound. So it's a kind of a reverse pattern, which is not unexpected because this roadway primarily serves is residential uses. So you're looking at that commuter traffic pattern where you've got an eastbound flow in the morning for people going to work, and then, or towards the school actually, and then heading back in the evening time period. So as it relates to the project and its impact on those traffic volumes, this type of project with senior housing, and I think importantly with an age qualification on it, the amount of traffic produced is relatively minor. It's not a significant increase in traffic that is expected. The other important part of looking at senior housing is generally seniors have a choice of when they want to travel during the day. We're not saying that people here may not be employed, but the majority of the residents choose to travel outside of the peak hours, outside of the time period when the children are being dropped off at school, just to avoid those time periods. So the project, in terms of how it impacts the 6,900 vehicles on a daily basis, the project will add about 104 vehicles to that. So it's less than a 2% increase in traffic on a daily basis on the roadway. Just looking at how traffic volumes fluctuate 5 days a week. So between Monday and Friday, traffic volumes fluctuate anywhere from 5 to 10%. So a 2% increase or less than a 2% increase in terms of how it relates to the roadway network, it's within the daily fluctuation of traffic volumes that you'd have Monday through Friday. So it's not significant in terms of net impacts on the roadway as it relates to existing conditions. Those peak hour numbers I mentioned, so about 700 vehicles during any one peak hour of the day, the project's going to add less than 10 vehicles on top of the 700 vehicles that are already out there today. So again, it's less than a 2% increase in traffic during the peak hours. And so as we're looking at how that impacts what people generally experience in terms of delays at intersections, so if I'm coming up on Grant Road and I come to the stop sign, I wait a certain amount of time today, how much is that delay time or wait time going to increase in the future? And then a secondary measure is how many vehicles are backed up at the intersection. So I get up there's a bunch of cars in front of me waiting at the stop sign. If there's a certain number of vehicles there today, how does this project impact how many vehicles are waiting there? So the impacts and delay at the intersection, what we showed, of course, with less than one added vehicle every 6 minutes during the peak hours, the impacts and delay were less than 1 second increase. So in terms of what you experienced there today, there'll be less than a 1 second increase in delay at any intersection along that roadway. In terms of the backup, so the queuing that happens at the intersection, so coming out of the school driveway or coming out of Grant Road, we may not have people coming to the school to pick up or drop off students. However, we're adding traffic going by the school driveway. So if you're trying to get out, there's additional traffic going by the driveway. So the increase in queuing was no more than 1 vehicle at any one of those intersections. So again, it speaks to the fact that this is a low impact project as it relates to traffic, and you can see in terms of percent increase in traffic as well as impacts on delays in queuing, it's similarly a very minimal impact at all. Speed of traffic along this roadway, that impacts crosswalk placement, it impacts the design, as you heard Christian mention, in terms of the type of control that we have at the crossing as well as placement of signs. So the posted speed limit in this area outside of the school-related zone is 30 miles an hour. So if the school zone is not flashing with the 20 miles an hour, it's 30 miles an hour is the posted speed limit. As we're measuring the daily traffic, so that's 6,900 vehicles per day, we're also recording the speed of each of those 6,900 vehicles, and we do that over 3 days. So we're roughly measuring the speed of about 20,000 vehicles going by the project site. So the average speed that we measured was somewhere around 30 to 35 miles an hour. So it's within a 5 mile an hour pace of the posted speed limit. However, what we found in terms of what the majority of vehicles were traveling at or below, that speed was found to be closer to 40. So it's about 37 miles an hour along this section of roadway. So as we're looking at placement of the driveway, as we're looking at sight lines, as we're looking at the crosswalk treatment, we're not looking at it based on 30 miles an hour. We're looking at it as it needs to meet the criteria for 40 miles an hour to make sure it's safe for our residents coming in and out of the project site, safe for a pedestrian that may be crossing at the crosswalk. So first looking at the driveway, its position as well as sight lines. In terms of what you need for actual sight lines, at 40 miles an hour, you need to see at least 305 feet, either exiting looking to the left or right, or if you're just driving along South Main Street and you're approaching the intersection, if a vehicle, say, was to pull out and stall right in the middle of that road, you have to be able to see that vehicle from a distance of 305 feet. And that's sufficient distance to see the vehicle, apply the brakes, and stop without striking the vehicle that's there. One of the things that's important as you think back to the presentation on the landscape architecture is as you look at those nice renderings that are there, what you see is the green area that they've shown has been set back from the edge of the roadway. So it's basically where you see the right-of-way line, which is the dot dash line on there. Everything is pulled back from behind that line or at that line. The other thing that you also saw was some nice grass along the front of the site. So what that does for us is you think about sight lines for something coming out, it's clear. So that's very important. So what we look at is the sight lines that are available will far exceed the 305 feet. In fact, you'll have sight lines that will approach about 400 feet. So placement of the driveway, the landscaping that you see, all ensure that we have adequate sight lines that far exceed what's needed for 40 miles an hour. Now, as it relates to the crossing, as you see where it is, it's placed in that location obviously because we have a sidewalk across the street to receive it. But also, as you think about 152 in this area, we're at a point where as you're along the road, and now I'm looking for a pedestrian that's crossing, it's at a good position from the standpoint of providing good line of sight, not only for a motorist that's approaching the crosswalk, but also for a pedestrian that's standing and looking and waiting to cross at that location. So it's an optimal location in terms of the geometry. As you see, if we moved it closer to where the driveway is or closer to Grant Road, you see the curve in the road happening in that area there. So I think as you heard mentioned, the placement of that crosswalk was done purposely with DPW to make sure that it's at a point where we have a nice sidewalk to receive it, but also it's at a location where there's good sight lines. And then lastly, relating to the crossing, as you heard, we are going to have what's known as a rectangular rapid flashing beacons. You're familiar with those, so it's a push button actuated. You come up to the crossing, you push a push button, it starts the yellow lights flashing so that a motorist knows that a pedestrian will be crossing at that location, and the pedestrian will cross. It's not a red, yellow, green traffic light or a red light. Actually, that is not, it wouldn't be allowed to be installed here. Certain criteria would need to be met, and this is not a location that would meet those criteria. However, that rectangular rapid flashing beacon it's wholly appropriate and certainly something that we recommend and is one of the reasons why it's on the plan because of the speed of traffic in this area. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have now or later on in the evening, but you do have a copy of the transportation assessment in your file. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
What about the traffic that's going to be going are the pedestrian traffic going the other way? In other words, you've now put a crossing right at where this school is. So kids leaving the school are going to naturally be attracted to crossing at that point now. Where do you anticipate them going once they cross?
So if they're crossing there, I mean, they would either, so they basically would be heading, the only sidewalk is basically into the project site. So,
right.
So I think that from the standpoint of where they'd be crossing to, there isn't a sidewalk other than our sidewalk to receive them. In terms of whether they have a destination or an orientation on that side, if they're crossing there today to get to some location. I mean,
well, there's a neighborhood in that
right.
area, so some kids might do it because it's easier or quicker to get to their home. But just kids in general tend to cross where, you make it possible to cross, so that they're naturally attracted to cross, whether we create, the perfect situation. And I just wondered if you had done any configuring on that or thinking about that when you created this.
So it's certainly safer from the standpoint of the crossing at that location from what currently exists. The question really comes down to is conveyance of the sidewalk and whether from the standpoint, and I think it really is it's a question for the town more so as it relates to, does the town have a desire to run a sidewalk on the other side of 152 heading in an easterly direction to convey the children and the pedestrians in that direction? There's certainly the sidewalk on the opposite side. This allows for connectivity between the project and the sidewalk that's on the opposite side.
I think
so
his question was more if that crosswalk is used a lot,
yeah.
then it's going to have a significant impact on traffic.
Again, it's not something that stops traffic. So from the standpoint of if pedestrians are pushing the push button to cross, it's no different than if a pedestrian wants to cross at an intersection as they made today. I mean, certainly we're adding a crosswalk where there isn't one, which is much safer than not having any crossing at all. So I think from the standpoint of what we've done for safety, what you always have to weigh is it better to have a safer situation from a crossing perspective?
No, all we're saying, the question was,
is it going to impact
if there's
traffic?
significant cross traffic there, it will impact traffic flow on the street.
That wasn't his question, though. That was not his question.
Wasn't that your question?
No, my question was just, I think there's an impact more to the neighborhood because you're going to have people crossing there, kids coming from the school and going to the school because they go there to play. There's playground space and ball fields and things. So I think that could have an impact on pedestrians coming through that neighborhood that don't necessarily use that side of the street currently. And I think the potential is that they also walk along the side of the property. You're creating a nice grassy area. They may choose to walk along there because you've kind of invited them to cross there now.
I think, yeah.
And that's, I think
Yeah.
that's something to think about
I
as
think
far
that's-
as your plan goes.
Yeah, I think it's really more so a question for the board as to whether you see it as a positive or negative. What we're trying to do is create a positive and a safer crossing to the extent that people want to do that. If what you and the neighborhood view as it being a detriment because it increases pedestrian activity in the area, I mean, I think that's certainly something that can be discussed. But I think from the standpoint of us, there's a desire line.
Right. No,
There's
I
a-
understand.
and
I mean, it makes
right.
sense to give people the access.
Right.
You want them to walk. I mean, they have to be able to
Yes.
walk. Yeah.
I think truthfully it's a net positive from the standpoint of safety and accessibility, and I think it's a question really, for the board and the neighborhood to provide feedback as to whether you see it as a positive or not. What I think we're suggesting is that there's a desire line, and if there's a desire line, we want to create a safe crossing where that desire line may want to be, and this is where that would take place. If it's the board's opinion or the neighborhood's opinion that the increased pedestrian activity is not desirable, then you'd have an alternative design for that. What I would suggest, though, to the extent that's kind of the view, is that you need to think hard about how you're going to prohibit what may be a desirable movement, rather than trying to accommodate a movement that more than likely is going to exist and achieve it in a safe manner. Because if we don't put the crossing in, it doesn't mean that there's still not a desire line for that to take place. I mean, you're correct that we're formalizing it. But if the desire is don't formalize that crossing, you need to think about how you're going to channelize pedestrians to where you want them to cross. And that just requires some thought.
Right. I think my question was more just, had you given that thought, and how was that reflected in your plan? That's more my thought.
No, and that's a very valid.
Yeah.
Very valid.
I don't think I'm not saying it's a bad
Correct.
thing. I think it's a
Correct.
good thing.
Yes.
That was one of my concerns when you came before, was that there was no way for the residents to access our downtown without, they couldn't get to the sidewalk before. So
It's a
an
holistic
improvement,
comment.
but.
That's right. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's 100% valid. From the standpoint of how it impacts traffic flow along the roadway, it is really going to be dependent upon how often the button is actually going to get pushed, and probably to your point, to the extent that there is a desire line for school crossing, I think it will be more that afternoon time periods when you might have a lot of school activity happening. That's when you might see actuations of it more frequently than exactly. Is it going to delay traffic? It certainly would, in a positive respect, I would think, from the standpoint of we want people to actually stop and allow for the children to cross there. You could arguably say it might have a positive impact in terms of the ability of people to, if you're coming out of the school drive and want to make a left and people are stopped, and at least if they don't block the intersection, you could interrupt traffic flow, which may actually create some opportunities. But there will be times of the day when it's actuated that it will impede the flow of traffic, just like a school bus stopping just to let kids off.
Just a question, you mentioned we have a copy of the traffic study?
We do. It was provided in the link, and we have it upstairs.
It's on the
hard
online
copy.
link,
Yeah.
not in the packets?
Yeah,
Okay,
there's only
just the
one.
link.
Yeah, there's
Okay.
one. Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
So the last person to come up other than me eventually would be Brian White of White Appraisals, and he's going to talk about how this project affects or doesn't affect the property values he's serving.
Good evening. Mr. Chairman and board, members of the board. You all should have gotten a copy of my report. I am Brian White, commercial and residential appraiser. I operate White Appraisal out of Dover, and I've been appraising commercial residential property in the Seacoast for the past 39 years. I hold the Appraisal Institute's MAI designation, which is the highest commercial designation they award, and also the SRA designation, which is the highest residential designation that they award. In this report, I've been asked by the applicant to give an opinion on if this project is approved as proposed, if there will be diminution in value of any of the surrounding properties. And my conclusion is that there won't be, but I'll tell you briefly how I get there. You all did get a copy of my report. I did certify, I have a certification page on page 10 that clearly says I have no interest in the property. This is an unbiased estimate. This is how I would opine on this property being approved, no matter who hired me. If you hired me, if a neighbor hired me, anybody else hired me, this is my opinion. I get paid either way, no matter what my conclusions are, so I call it as I see it. To do this, I have a process that I work through where I, in the report, talk about the existing development. You all know what's there. It's a ranch with some we call excess land that's proposed for this new affordable elderly housing development. The proposed development, they've gone over, others have talked about it here in detail, but it's going to be 2 full stories, a 3rd floor with a shed dormer, 32 one-bedroom units, 34 parking spaces, a single paved entry drive. I look at the neighborhood and the abutting properties. It's a mixed-use area. In this area, we've got a variety of single-family homes, schools, office space, medical office. It's a vacant property, subject partially being one of those. And you've got the Wadley Falls senior housing development a half mile down the road. In the greater neighborhood, it's an existing similar facility, similar use facility. But there are other commercial or non-residential uses in the area. I look at factors that can impact value when you have a new use coming in, and those are typically noise, view, and use. First component here, the noise. This property is going to be a very much self-contained elderly housing property. I wouldn't anticipate that there's going to be a lot of exterior yard use, and so the loudest noises will probably be from the maintenance of the property, grassed areas, trimmings, plowing, which you're going to get with any type of a development in this area. So the noise change is going to be minimal. The view change, it's going to change from what's now an open field to having a 2-story plush shed dormer, 3rd level building. But this is going to be a brand new, modern, very attractive, modern design building, modern landscape, all new, very good condition property that's going to be as good or in many cases better condition than all of the surrounding neighborhood. The condition of the neighborhood is what I call average to good. There's some properties that are in good condition, and there's some that are older properties in average shape, still functional for uses, whatever it might be. But this is going to add a very good condition use to the neighborhood, and with this condition, it's a little bit of the rising tide floats all boats. Once you start to change the condition of any neighborhood from average to good to very good, new properties, sometimes the domino effect takes place, and you get an uplifting, an overall condition improvement for the neighborhood. That's typically ends in a value enhancement, but this is just one building that might start that to happen. The one property that is immediately adjacent to it is part of this development. It's 242 South Main. It is the cape that is going to be retained on half an acre. The owner's retaining that property for their own, they subdivide this, they're going to be retaining that ownership. So they're willing to take any kind of view change that might impact that property, because there's not going to be any big screening between that property and this subject, but it's sort of a self-induced factor that they're willing to accept. As far as the use, it's going to be a 32-unit affordable elderly housing property. Like I said, a half mile down the road, you have the Wadley Falls development already existing in the similarly greater neighborhood. Other uses in the R2 zone are single family. These are by right, including manufactured housing, nursing home, daycares, bed and breakfast, commercial excavation, agricultural, and animal husbandry. While none of these uses are ones that would be undesirable in other areas, some of them, the uses are uses that some residential abutters or neighbors would find to be less desirable uses as compared to what is currently proposed for the subject property, or far less desirable. So then I looked, after considering all these factors, I looked for data in the market and tried to find data. Paired sales are the ideal, but and there's a lot of examples where other affordable housing developments have gone in the greater Newmarket area, along with the Wadley Falls development. But there is no clear data from data points that I could find. So I went to sort of a Plan B analysis, and that is contacting other towns assessors who have experience with similar properties going in their communities, and seeing if they've seen any change in value, diminution in value. I spoke with Michelle Pelletier, Michael Pelletier, the Newmarket assessor, about the Wadley Falls development. Jim Rice, the Durham assessor, about Churchill and Baghdad Woods that went in and their surrounding impacts. I spoke with Teresa Hervey, the deputy assessor with Rochester, and Donna Langley, the Dover assessor, about Mass Landing and the Rochester property, the Arthur H. Nicholas property. These are all examples of affordable LA housing that went into either a mixed use or residential development, and the question is, was there any impact of diminishing the value on surrounding properties? And none of them could come up with any complaints, assessment claims, value issues that they could note. The only one that had anything that was value impact was Jim Rice with the Baghdad Woods development. It's an existing affordable housing development where they added some new units, 30 additional units over the last couple of years. And he indicated that over the last couple of years since COVID, that the neighborhood that property is located in actually had a value enhancement that was above the value enhancement that all the other average communities in Durham had experienced over the last couple of years. So his conclusion there was that it had no negative impact, and if it did anything, it brought again a newer, very good condition use to the neighborhood that statistically showed an increase in value. So based on all that information, it is my conclusion that this would likely be the same, that bringing this new, modern, very good condition use with proper buffering and design that's already been gone over, that it would be have no diminution in value, and in fact might enhance and uplift the overall condition of the greater neighborhood.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Board members? No. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
So, again, FX Brewtown for the record. So that's a lot of information. We wanted to be thorough because we knew that this board and the residents would want to understand those issues, at least from our perspective and from the perspective of professionals. It was really important for the developers to go through this process, and I think it's somewhat unique. You don't usually see applicants go into this much detail, but these applicants work, live, and have been associated with Newmarket since 1985. Our offices are in Newmarket, and they have a very deep connection with this community, so they wanted to do it right. And they wanted to make sure that all of those issues that we heard about would be addressed with respect, but also thoroughly and with knowledgeable people. And we hope that you would agree that that's what we've done. I know it's a lengthy presentation in that regard, but we thought it was important, certainly important to the applicants. I will go through the special use criteria. The issues, a lot of the issues that we are part of that criteria have been addressed by the experts, but I'll go through it in a way that won't, hopefully drone and drag on. So I'll kind of bounce through my written materials, which I'm sure you've all taken a look at. And then, obviously, we'll turn it back to the board and the public. So the first criteria for the special use permit is, it's a little bit lengthy, but I'll paraphrase. You can correct me if you want to talk about some other issue in this criteria. But are you basically close to the shopping, medical, and transportation services? That's kind of the first part of the first criteria. You know, we've mentioned Wadley Falls. It's a project that, by the way, we're the same size in terms of height, so we're very similar. They have more units, but they're further away from the downtown. We're closer to the downtown. They've been operating very efficiently for the last 15 years successfully, and there's no reason to think that we don't meet this part of this criteria given the proximity of the project. The next subpart of this first is, you know, do you have the usual amenities and living aids found in housing designed for the elderly? The architect talked about those community spaces, the accessibility, and things, you know, we in our materials talked about spaces for a community garden, community room with kitchenette, picnic tables. Again, our proximity to the downtown and Lamprey Healthcare and all of that. You know, we're going to have covered front porches, elevators, communal laundry facilities, and the finishes we talked about, and you know, all the lighting and things like that. Dark Star compliant, but again, a special look to make sure that the residents were served by those components as well on a safe basis. The second is the diminution in value prong, if you will, which is kind of like what we have to deal with in the other board that you have in town, the ZBA. But this is part of your special use permit criteria. Obviously, Brian has given you a great perspective on that. If you remember the board that we put up, kind of showing you the context of where we are, it also shows you the context of where other facilities are, particularly Wadley Falls, surrounded by mostly single-family homes, or if not exclusively there, and again, further away from the town. We, I think, are, again, in an area that's closer to the town, but also not only surrounded by where the abutters and neighbors live, but also near mixed uses that you know, we have less of an impact, we think, on the values because of that kind of mixed use community that we're looking at to put this in. So we think that it's obviously appropriate. Again, one of the critical things that I mentioned kind of all the way in the beginning of this is the town itself, first off, thought elderly assisted housing is a good thing. And the reason you thought it was a good thing is because you created the very reason that we're here. You created opportunities for this project. This project represents exactly what you were looking for when you and this board created that zoning portion of your zoning ordinance and the town voted for it. But you limited it, again, you limited it to very specific areas within town, and that's where we are. If we step back and say, well, it sounds great, but you know, what does that really mean in terms of affordable? You know, what are we, the board, you, being asked to participate in terms of allowing in this town? We know housing is out of control. I mean, I don't think I have to explain that to anyone. The pricing is difficult. You had the foresight to think of what could be done to entice a developer to come forward with an affordable housing. What's affordable? In this context, these units at today, now these are subject to change by the state and the HUD rates, but if we were built and open tomorrow, the rates in terms of what's charged would be premised upon someone's income. But the range would be between $693 and $1,386 per unit. That would include heat, hot water, electric, AC, That's affordable housing for the elderly. That's exactly what you, the board, want to see in this area and in these areas that you've limited. So I think, you know, that was created with that in mind, and that's what we're delivering. Again, on a smaller scale than what we could in terms of density. We reduced our density. And we're here to work with you in terms of, do you want the green wall or not? We hope you don't, because we'd like them to be part of the community too, as much as the developers are and will be after the project is built. So in any event, just again, not to belabor or read every word I wrote because you've already read it. The third one is the one that probably the most important one in terms of their conflicts in the character or adjacent properties will be minimal in terms of the size and bulk, not completely non-existent, but minimal in terms of the size and bulk of the visible buildings through the use of buffers, landscaping, or location of the building on site. I'll stop there and say we've done an extremely thorough review ourselves of what the buffering could be or should be, the landscaping as well, and particularly the location of the building on the site. We're protecting the extremely sensitive natural environmental features of this property. We're providing a buffer with respect to the properties in the back of the parcel. We're limiting where we are on this 7 acres to a very small area. In doing that, I think we've addressed that issue. The next part is the provision is meant to assure that the facilities are reasonably consistent either with residential style buildings or sufficiently secluded so as to minimize negative impacts to the abutters. We think we've met that test very clearly. We hope you would agree. If we haven't, if there's suggestions that can be made, we've already indicated in our materials, and we would work with the board to try and come to a point where we've met that, although we think we have, obviously. So the other criteria are fairly straightforward. The development shall be landscaped so as to enhance its compatibility with the town and emphasis given to the use of existing natural features where possible. I think we've kind of gone through that quite a few times. But again, we provide a screening and separation of the building from the street and the adjacent parcels. I think we've shown that with the types of materials that we propose and the structure that we've created with the units in the attic and all of those things that we've done, they've been intentional to meet that part of the test. Number 5 is that the design and site layout of development will emphasize the rural character of the town and maximize the privacy of the dwelling units, preserve the natural character of the land, and provide separation of parking and neighborhood residential uses, considering factors such as orientation, energy use, and views. All of our professionals tonight have talked about those very specific issues. We can certainly address those issues, but you know, one of the main important things for us was to preserve that significant natural resource, and I think that will serve and protect not only the residents here, but the town in general. I think that's an important element that we've accomplished. The 6th element is that the parking complies. We actually exceed the parking in terms of number of spaces and also in terms of ADA required spaces. We know from a study that was referenced by one of the architects that we're really looking at a possible use of around 0.59 spaces, but we've provided more than one. And then we have the accessible spaces as well. 7 is interesting because your requirement is that only 75% of these units be affordable, and as we indicated, 100% of these spaces, these units would be affordable, so we exceed that criteria as well. And then you didn't want manufactured housing, and we're not proposing manufactured housing. So I think obviously we meet that criteria as well. We know that we'll hear from the abutters, and we did hear from the abutters, and we addressed, we think, what a lot of the concerns were when we last heard from them. One of the things I wanted to make sure is that we received a copy of a letter from Lisa Henderson of 6 Maple Crest Street, and I see that the planner has it in hand, and it looks like maybe the rest of the members have it. I have extra copies if you like. She talks about a lot of the issues that I did as well. And again, I just want to leave again with the concept that this board, through its zoning process, came up with this need. It's obviously a critical need, and the developer has taken all of that into account and obviously been very thorough in terms of how can we address everything so that we do it right. And I think we have, and we hope you would agree. We're here either for your general comments that haven't already been asked by our team, or we can certainly address it once the public has had their opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, FX. All right, thank you and your team for your presentation. So I think at this point, I'm going to open it up to public comment. But before I do, I just want to explain the process for all of you out there that may not know how this works. So the developer has presented a proposal, a plan. They've had their professionals provide information for us to review. So what typically happens now is that as a planning board, we develop what's called a TRC, which is Technical Review Committee. We get 2 or 3 board members to volunteer, and we meet with department heads in the town. We meet with fire, police, DPW, water, sewer, to get their input into any project like this. The TRC goes through the project very thoroughly and comes back to the board generally with recommendations, and they go through answering questions and whatnot. The other thing that happens is a project of this size, we will send out to a review engineer to review. So everything that was talked about here tonight will be reviewed by an engineer working for us, the appropriate people. So there'll be a traffic review, there will be someone that reviews stormwater, parking. So every aspect of this project will be reviewed by another professional, not just members of the board here. Excuse me, so that's the process. So this is typically a fairly lengthy process. We'll have several meetings. So obviously every meeting will be a public hearing. You can come to all the meetings and voice your concerns. Much like the last time, I would just ask that if you're going to say the same thing as the person in front of you, just try to make it concise, because there's going to be a lot of meetings like this, and there's going to be a lot of time for everybody involved with this to get to a conclusion. So with that, I think I will open it up to the public. So when you come up and speak, please just give your name and address, if you would, please. And if you don't want to say anything, that's fine. You'll have plenty of other opportunities. I mean, you notice the board hasn't asked a lot of questions here tonight yet because we haven't really absorbed a lot of the details ourselves.
She also has if they're in other costs.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Okay. And also, if you give your address, you also let us know if you're in a butter, direct abutter, or where you live relative to the project. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Derek Conrad. I live at 245 South Main Street. I'm a direct abutter. I'm not just a direct abutter, but I live at the driveway of the school, one of the driveways. And you know, this is not to come up here and talk about attack the plans and things like that. So it's just kind of more of a matter of opinion and some things coming from the last meeting to being here for this meeting, but I feel like a sense of urgency of some of the things we said were addressed, but some were not. So I just made some notes and just like to kind of go over that just to be heard. So we heard a lot of talk of the community, the community, the community. Well, we're the community. We live there. We've lived there for, in some cases, several years. So we are very concerned from the danger of the particular area, and that's my, you know, landscape's second to what I want to talk about now. But the dangerous spot of like talked about sight lines and, okay, 10 more cars more, it meets the checks the boxes, meets the variances, whatever. But we're not concerned about that. What we're concerned about is the danger of elderly and senior folks at a very dangerous intersection to begin with. And if you live in this town, we all know that. And then the children who are going to be invited to cross along there. It's an invitation. And now we're having elderly come out one side, the dangers of the children coming on the other side. And I guess I just feel like tonight, we did address that in the last hearing, and when some of the professionals came up and talked about their parts and their professional criteria to meet, that wasn't addressed. And I think one of the board members had mentioned that. And that was one of the critical things that we had brought up at the last meeting as the community. So there was no presentation on that, on how, I think we said, or someone said, leave it up to the board to decide. No, I mean, the community made it a point, a case in point is a critical need, and it wasn't addressed tonight. So that was just a little disappointing, that's all. So I think, a lot of consideration needs to be made with that danger intersection, with inviting a crosswalk for children. And I hope some of the parents that have, my kids are grown, but some parents that have the kids go to that school, look for that. Now, I'm a 13-year military police officer, Army vet, and I've seen some traffic accidents. I've seen a lot of them. And I've seen some impacts, and I've seen some dangerous areas. And I've lived in a lot of places. And the place I live today is a very dangerous intersection. I think we all know that. So I like to just see a little bit more care and attention from the board, from the applicator, from the professionals delivering the information. Just consider, the dangerous situation that's there now, and what could potentially, become more dangerous. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak? If you don't want to speak tonight, don't worry, you'll have plenty of opportunities to speak.
My name is Dawn Mazer. I live at 34 Maple Crest. I have 155 feet against my abutment in my backyard. My sump pump goes off. I've been taking times. Goes off every 45 minutes. Now, yesterday when it rained, it was every 20. What's that going to do when we have a lot of rain? I walked in my backyard. It looks like it's flat, but it's not. It's all divots because of where it's all sunk in. Where's the water going to go when you build this?
Well, what they said tonight was that there's going to be less water coming off the site than goes there now because of their stormwater management. But we will have a professional review that to make sure we agree with that.
Okay, and I understand stormwater, but
Yes.
I already have constant water.
Well, this isn't going to change that.
Right.
Good or bad, it's not going to
And
impact
I have
that.
it in the winter.
Yeah.
It's constant. So, speeders. I live on Maple Crest, and it's sometimes hard to pull out of that street because people are speeding. Now, I try to turn onto Grant Road because that's where my brother-in-law lives, and I have to stop because of the traffic that's coming from 152. It's fast. I see neighbors in my neighborhood now. Kids run across the street. A car's coming. They're kids. They're just going to do that. I've lived there my whole life, 64 years. So I've seen all this, and I've seen what it can happen. My fear is that it's going to take one accident, one death, for us to realize this should not have happened. That's my fear, because of what we're bringing into that area, because it is a children's development area, really, for Maple Crest. I mean, it's mostly children and dogs, and then the elementary across the street. They're gonna just do that, kids and kids. They don't always push the button. Oh, car's way down there, I can run across. What if they fall? Or an elderly person? That's my fear, that a death, my panic, that a death could possibly happen. And then one other thing is, where are the telephone poles gonna go?
Site, so going into the site?
I don't believe the telephone poles are
They'd
gonna
have to be
change.
underground.
Anything going in the site will be underground.
Okay, so the maple trees that are supposedly gonna be there, how long is it gonna take for those trees that we see in the picture come to what we see in the picture?
Good question, we'll ask that question.
Because it's not,
Jump on.
I live on Maple, because I see headlights already on 152 from my house through the trees. I'm gonna end up seeing those lights. And now, you didn't mention how high the building is. It was 35 feet before, but no one's mentioned the feet.
It can't be any higher than 35.
Okay, so,
And we will go through all those details with the architectural,
Okay.
With their plans that they've submitted for the architectural
Alright.
stuff.
so, who covers the maintenance of that place? Is it gonna be like HOA?
The owner, whoever,
Oh.
however the owner wants to take care of it.
Oh, so so they're not rented, they're purchased.
No, I think they might be rented, but whoever owns the building, the facility will be responsible for maintaining, for
Oh,
plowing,
okay.
mowing the lawn, anything else having to do with that.
Okay. And then, I drove to Stratham today, and this is awful, but I need to visualize what I'm gonna see. And when I went past Market Basket and saw that Optima Dermatology building, tall, no trees, it was an eyesore. I'm sorry, and that's Stratham, downtown, grocery stores, everything. It's gonna diminish what our little neighborhood is, because we don't have that high sight. Town Hall, yes, it's been there. Wally Falls, yeah. I don't see Wally Falls from the street when I'm driving by. You don't see it. There's no crosswalk that could hurt elderly that live there. They all have to drive. And if you have elderly pulling out of that parking lot, you know they're cautious. They're gonna pull out, they gotta watch from Grant Road, they gotta watch from 152, they gotta watch the crosswalk. Those are my fears. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Linda Dozier, 249 South Main. I'm at butter right across the street. The crosswalk was mentioned, I know, but I invite any of you to come and stand over there and try to cross that road. Lots of times, even down street, nobody utilizes the buttons with the flashing to cross. And with this area where they want the crosswalk, there's a curve right there coming from town. One car was already rear-ended, stopped going to the school because they come around that curve. It's dangerous. He said, comparing it to Wadley Falls and the Pines. Wadley Falls is only 2 stories. He keeps saying this is 2 stories. I don't see how it's 2 stories. I see 3. It's 3 stories? Is that correct?
That's the way I see it.
I see it too, but they were referring to it as 2. And also the Pines is only 1 story. The Pine is the Pines looks like a New England type building. This looks like a motel that you see on the side of the highway. We've asked before for better designs on this to fit into the neighborhood. This is taking away from our neighborhood. We've met with Mr. Lemire back in January, the abutters, and at that time we asked him to please try to downsize. He says no, he would not. It was brought up again at the meeting in March several times to try to downsize this, make it 2 stories, not so high that it's not this spaceship in the middle of a field. I know one of the criteria that I believe in the zoning is that it's supposed to fit in with the neighborhood. This does not fit in with the neighborhood at all. Benefit for the town, how many residents of Newmarket are going to be guaranteed some of these apartments?
Nobody.
Nobody.
But if they move in
right.
town, they become a resident, just like all of us did.
Right, but I mean, it's supposed to benefit the town. It'd be nice if some of our own people were.
I don't think legally they can. We'll let them address that later on. That's a question we'll ask them, but I don't believe they can
Okay, well, I'm just
restrict it
throwing
to
out
Newmarket.
questions we all have,
Yep.
that's all. And then another gentleman brought up, it's kind of hard to hear, but I heard him say Rochester a couple of times, comparing to some other projects in those towns and around. The project in Rochester, just like this one, is on a side street that already has apartment buildings, not houses with apartments, but apartment buildings on either side of this elderly home. So it did not affect the neighborhood at all, like it's going to affect ours. Being across the street, the 3 houses that mostly affected, the parking lot, I would like to see more landscaping in that. Then to have to look at all the cars and the lights and stuff. These people are 55 and older. That's not old. They're going to be coming and going on there. And I think someone else mentioned something about this was going to be nicer than some of the other buildings around. Was it something like that that was stated? Yeah. Well, please come down and look at our neighborhood. Houses are pretty well taken care of, and so are the properties. Scott was at my house, he can tell you. So that was kind of a slam to the neighborhood. So I think this does not fit in with the neighborhood at all. It's too big. We've asked him to please downsize to at least 2 stories. It's a subsidized project, I believe, so this is something that the government contributes to. So there'd be some financial gain either way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Gail Washevsky. I live at 236 South Main Street. I'm an abutter, and no one has ever come to me to say, do you have any concerns about what's happening? None of the owners of the property have even sent a letter to me other than the surveyor. I have several concerns. I live on a curve. I don't know how many of you live up on South Main Street, but from the start of this gentleman's home, this has got a beautiful front yard, is a curve. And you can't see around that curve. There's only one speed limit sign on Railroad Ave Bridge. It says 30 miles an hour. They go 40, 50 miles an hour. I'm pleased to see that the gentleman who did the roadside survey said that the speed was more like 40 miles an hour. Try 50. Try the flashing sign that kept saying, danger, 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 slow down. I walk across that street twice on the weekends and once every evening with my dog. And I pray that I'll get across the street without getting hit, or that he'll get hit. No one follows the speed limit except the people who live on that area. Take a look. Go stand in front of my little falling down brick garage and stand there and look, and you can't see around the curve. Come up over Moonlight Bridge, up onto 152 South Main Street. You can't see until you get to the peak of that road because it's all curve. So plus you've had what, 2, 3 accidents there, Linda? Just this past year? I don't think, number one, it's probably a bad idea that the town took over that road so they could get sewer and water done the way they wanted to, because that's what happened. I know, I live there. But so we can cut ends when the state would require a larger area for parking, etc. And I want to know that, I don't know about you, but seniors are not 50 years old anymore. That's AARP, age 50, senior. I'm a retired nurse. Seniors are more to 65, 75 years old today. They are going to have children. They are going to have, unless they're going to have sign a contract that says I will have only one vehicle, because how many of you in this room only have one vehicle in your household? Seriously, how many of you only have one vehicle in your household? So where are these cars going to park when they have company? On the side of the road because there's not enough parking spots? And if there's actually 32 rented apartments, that's 32 cars. I think I heard 34 parking spots. I could be wrong. So what happens to my husband's truck if I move in there?
Well, this is all for us to decide through the permitting process.
I
They
know,
meet our requirements.
But realistically,
That's all we can ask them to do is meet our requirements.
realistically, traffic is going to be more than 32 cars on that roadway.
I don't agree with you at this point,
Well,
but You
My
have your
other
opinion.
concern is what happens with snow removal, salt and sand,
They have to take care of it
with
themselves.
the wetlands.
Yep.
Also, the flashing lights. There should have been a sidewalk on that opposite side of the road for years, because kids are constantly walking on that side. The people from Waterloo Falls, the elderly, they come out and they walk the side of the road that has no sidewalk. Scares me to death. The other thing is the flashing lights. That's all well and good. Our teachers, our adults, our principals, the kids at the high school don't use the lights. Trust me, I know. I go by there 5 days a week at 7:50 to take my dog to Newfields, and nobody's pushing the, and I'll take that back. That's not a fair statement. A large portion of the people that are using that crosswalk do not use the lights. Downtown, the light by where the Mexican restaurant is, half the people don't use that light, because there's nothing enforced in this town.
Right, well, you can't force it. I happen to agree with you, because I just happened to meet tonight a woman crossing across without
You
hitting the
can't
light.
see
But
them.
there's no
What do you
requirement
do?
for a pedestrian to hit the
You're
light.
coming down, if you're coming into town
Yeah.
by the library, you're coming down a curved hill.
Yeah.
Can't see the
Yeah, if you don't
people.
hit the light, you're taking your life in your own hands. I mean.
Downtown in front
you are.
of the Big Bean, they don't have one of those flashing lights. We're kind of half and half. We put them and we don't. You can't see people coming in front of the parked cars into the crosswalk. So now you're going to put another flashing light cross area where children and, quote, 50-year-old elderly people are going to be crossing. I am very concerned about the wetlands. My backyard, the back end of my property that meets their property, already has flooding issues. The water this year is higher than it's ever been in the back of my yard. So I can't build back there because it's wetland. Just
Right.
a point.
No, you're right, you're accurate, and that's why they're not building back there, because of wetlands. There's no
But-
dispute that there's wetlands back there.
Great Hill, all the dynamiting in the building that's been going on up there has forced a change in the water levels. Now, they're gonna build a 32 housing unit, and they're going to be plowing and digging and laying concrete and cement and all this. It's gonna change the water table. It's gonna change how water is absorbed and how it flows. I don't want more water in my backyard. I don't want more pumping of my pump.
I agree. But that's why we have somebody else look at it. We just don't take their
Somebody
word
else
at it. We have another
besides the
engineer.
people we have in town?
Yeah, we're gonna have another engineer look at that.
A
and-
hired engineer?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
My name's Liv Elby. I live at 262 Wadley Falls. I had actually emailed earlier, but to address your comment, I have two small children. They're 8 and 10. They go to the elementary school. And my fear, we don't walk that way. We'll come up Wadley Falls, cross, and go up Grant and go through the elementary school to get anywhere because the traffic is so dangerous coming through. Basically, it's like a racetrack. As soon as they hit the new duplex that's on Wadley Falls, right next to my house, they gun it. And I'm talking 60 miles an hour, if not more. And my fear is if they're turning out of this new building to the left, the people coming up from Wadley Falls that I watch speed past my house, they're gonna come around and up that slope and around that corner, and if somebody's pulling out of that driveway, the speed, I've actually asked the police to back into my driveway because it would be not visible for people to be able to see. We watch, my 8-year-old constantly is scared because people will pass people on the double yellow lines and go over the bridge passing people. And it happens, I can't tell you how many times I've almost been hit pulling into my own driveway. Every time I'm scared with my kids in the car. My other question was, I had said in my email, was I know that you said you'll meet with like the fire department and stuff to make sure that they have adequate, you know, I mean, it doesn't look as tall as I was expecting, but it does look bigger. And it definitely doesn't fit in. And the elderly housing up on Wadley Falls is completely different it's set back way off the road than this is, because we actually have a good friend that lives right in front of it. And I've also spoken with a couple of people that have braved walking from Wadley Falls down, and they even are scared to walk through where this area is. I've had a gentleman, he's since moved out of there, but he fell across the street from my driveway and was laying there on the road, and nobody helped him during COVID. People just kept driving past him as he laid on the side of the road. So without sidewalks, like, that's why my children get the bus, because there is no sidewalks to come through that area. And I agree that I think children would press that button and they would go, and if there's not sidewalks for them to be on, I could see it being a danger through there. So I just wanted to address the fact that I do have young children in that area, and it's quite hazardous.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, if we all decide that we don't want the flashing light there, we don't have to put a flashing light there.
Right.
They're recommending it as a safety issue.
Yep.
I think it's safer than not having one there, but at the end of the day, if everybody agrees.
But I think if
Don't
the
want one.
sidewalk extended, that might be
That-
a lot
then-
better for the children.
I agree, but that's a town issue, that's not for
Okay.
this development.
Okay.
I agree with you, for the most part, with that, absolutely.
And then the other thing that was plumbing was with the water and the sewer. My dad owns his own plumbing company, and he was saying to me it definitely will probably affect our water pressure and stuff like that. So I don't know how true and, you know, realistic that is, and that's obviously a concern. And then same thing with the water. I mean, unless, like they seem to say that they have stormwater and stuff like that. Where we are, we're right at the bridge, and our yard turns into, we have like an island all the
Are you the
time.
first house right after the bridge heading into town?
We're the first house right at the end of the school zone
Yeah,
side.
yeah, okay.
Yep. But part of it has to do with, there is beavers and stuff in that area, and so they're, you know, changing it as well. So just to take that into account of the water is changing, so I just, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Hi.
Steve Sarasi, 240 South Main Street, former owner. My son's the current owner. We're here talking about safety of this driveway. It's my understanding that if this driveway was about 30 feet to the west, the sightline requirement would be double. Be a 400-foot site requirement per the state. Now, I heard our traffic study gentleman speak to the fact that it's 305 feet, which is adequate for 40-mile-an-hour traffic. But the reality of the situation is the state would require 400 feet, not the 200 feet that the town requires. And he's skirting that issue by placing his driveway 30 feet short of being on a state road. So we've had 3 significant accidents in this area in the last year, 2 of which involved non-moving vehicles being hit by another moving vehicle. So if we're talking about kids crossing the road and additional senior citizens crossing the road, fortunately those 2 vehicles that got hit were people in vehicles, and one of them was a school bus. If someone could hit a moving school bus, it takes some doing, honestly. So what's it going to take to hit a kid? What's it going to take to hit a senior citizen trying to cross the road here? As part of what do we state them as, not the requirements, but as part of the criteria for approval, we heard from an esteemed appraiser in regards to the property value. Just so happens, I just within the last month had to sell my property at 240 South Main Street to my son. And you know what I was told by 2 realtors? Number one, I had to disclose that this was even going to be potentially happening here. And 2, that it did indeed affect my property. That in the market that we were in over the last year and a half since post-COVID, that yeah, okay, maybe prices were going up and appropriately, no matter where a building was being sold, we were gonna see a raise in property values. But that as soon as that market starts to calm down and starts to normalize again, that this is going to be a detriment. People are gonna be looking for properties without this in their line of sight. We talked about the wetlands and using the area up the hill and burying it in the woods like all of these other developments are doing, and not putting it in the field right on the street. And I understand, you know, it's gonna cost our developer a little bit more money to do that, and he's gonna need to get a variance to cross the wetlands. But we do already have a breach across the wetlands. There's a logging road that runs across it, shown on all the delineation, the maps that show this logging road crossing there. And I know he doesn't like going up there. He might have to build a little smaller complex, might cost him a little bit more money to do that, but honestly, it's not my problem. Okay, he's paying for this with tax credits. He's got subsidized housing. He's gonna make market rent. So what the cost is not relevant to what can and can't be done here. It can be done. He just doesn't want to look at that. Landscaping. Let's read specifically, our attorney read from the criteria for approval. I'm going to read from the requirement. The buffer shall be sufficient opacity to adequately shield the abutting residential properties from the development. Buffer strips must contain vegetation that will partially screen the view from adjacent residential properties during all seasons. All seasons. Not summer, when there's leaves on a couple of trees that he plans on putting out front. All seasons. We're talking about a 35-foot building. We're talking about 5 or 6 trees across the front, and then some undergrowth that I believe was stated there was going to be 2 rows of undergrowth that were 3 to 4 feet and 4 to 5 feet. Not going to do much to buffer a 35-foot building. Okay, that's a requirement. The buffer between the houses is a requirement. It also doesn't make mention of the fact that we have 2 houses on either side of this that have no buffer. The buffer is designed across the front to buffer from the street. Buffer requirement is all around the building. I haven't seen anything. Apparently we've got 2 trees that currently exist on one side of the property, but beyond that, there's nothing to buffer that building from the properties next door. The smoking patio, which we talked about the last time we were here, hasn't been addressed. The average person in this age group is going to be a smoker. They're not going to be able to smoke inside this building, most likely, which means they're going to be outside smoking. Best I can tell, he's put an entrance at the front side here. I don't think we're going to have a smoking patio in the 35 feet between the street and the building, which means they're going out back somewhere. Once again, no buffer for the sound, no buffer for the voices, the traffic, the people coming in and out of the parking, no buffer for the mechanical that's likely to be outside. We actually have pictures of the last development that this developer built in Rochester, and it's appalling to see the mechanical in the yard completely unbuffered. It's appalling to see the height after 10 years since this development's been built of the views that you see from the street. There is no buffer. It's a requirement. It's not in the criteria for approval. It's a requirement for an all-season buffer.
Thank you.
Sorry, I needed to add one thing. Don Mesa, from Maple Crest. Today, when I was going down 152, the property at 242 had a white pickup truck and a trailer for a lawnmower. And it's parked on the side of the road. I had to stop for 10 cars to come, so I could get around him, because there's not enough room to pass through without going over the yellow line or being within distance of the vehicle. So that's a concern I have, that if anybody is parking, if they do need space at this building, where are they gonna park? Are they gonna park on the side of the street? It's dangerous. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hello.
Hi, good evening.
Ed Sarossi, 240 South Main Street. Just a couple quick notes. As my dad mentioned, I purchased the property from him. It was a pretty relaxed real estate transaction, so I did find it interesting that there was a disclosure for this proposed building on the purchase and sale agreement. The architect mentioned building the building the long way so that people could see the field, but it's a parking lot. I think that is everything for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Linda Dozier again, 249 South Main Street. Back to the real estate agent, I also inquired with a real estate agent and was told that the houses will not be as valuable as if there was still a neighborhood feel being built instead of having this large building. There's something else I wanted to say too, but I forgot. Ambulance, services, I know that you're gonna deal with that afterwards, but at times now, the ambulances are constantly going either to the Pines or up to Wadley Falls. Sometimes the ambulances are in service and the Durham has to be called in. Sometimes there's not enough volunteers that answer the calls. So this is going to be a impact on the town of either hiring people full-time or getting another ambulance. Because there are a lot of calls, and not just these places, there's just gonna add to more calls coming in. Thank you.
Thank you. We will review that with the fire department. Absolutely. So we'll review that with the fire department. Thank you.
Hello, Jen Polishano, 2 Pond Street. I'm not a direct abutter, but I can throw a stone at this project. I just had a couple questions. The first one, so this is zoned for 55 plus, correct? Does it stay that way forever? Or what happens if, say, they don't rent out all the places to 55 plus? Can it be changed to be other types of housing? Or is this agreement keeping it 55 plus?
I believe it's in perpetuity, but we'll find that out.
Yeah, that's just one of my comments. The other one, somebody brought up the fact that, so in front of the property will not be a sidewalk, correct? So there's gonna be some grass there, right off of 152? Is that?
Towards Grant Road, yes.
Yeah, so in front, is that, so if there's 32 parking spaces, I think we all know that there's gonna be probably more than that in visitors. What would prevent them from parking right in front of it on 152, which would cause an even bigger traffic problem and safety issue? Would there be anything, like, could they put up something that say that, or would there be space for them to park there?
I don't know if there'd be space, but we would certainly talk with Rick about putting up no parking signs.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that would probably be a great idea for them to park there, because it's such a
I mean,
bad
people are
spot.
gonna park where they wanna park, as you know, they just go everywhere.
Well, no, I know, but I'm saying there are
Yeah.
certain places that probably shouldn't have it because it's a safety issue.
Yep.
A lot of the stuff I was gonna say was already covered, which is great. The water, it's gonna be on town water, sewer?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And, I mean, what kind of impact is that gonna have already? Like, I see like water, voluntary water conservation. Are there any studies done with that, or?
No, the town will typically, through the water department, will look at the system and the amount of water they have and the pressure, make sure that it's adequate for the development.
Okay, all right. And just my final point, I know there was a lot of talk about trying to blend it in with the neighborhood. There is no blending this in. I hate to say that. It just does not fit in at all with the neighborhood. And I'm not sure how we can change it or if it could be changed, but it's a monstrosity and there's nothing in the area. The school is one story, the Pines is one story, you know, as they talked about Wadley Falls, all one story and way away from the road. I feel bad for the people that are directly across from them. I think it would be, you know, tough to look at every day. So that's my opinion.
Thank you. Anybody else? There's going to be plenty of other opportunities to speak, so. Can we get, you want to read them into the?
You want to read them into the record?
You want to read them in?
Yeah, I'll read them in.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. This is from Elizabeth Dowd. As we received today, 7:40. Hi, Bart. Hope your son's doing well. Unable to attend the meeting this evening. About the proposed affordable senior housing project across the street from me. I'd like the planning board to please take into consideration the size and scope of the project, and in particular the height and style of the building. Does not fit in with any of the other residents in the neighborhood. I do support affordable homes in this area and our two-story structures. It just seems to appear that we will have a very tall building across the street that has more stories than either of the nearby schools, let alone homes. It looks more like a Motel 6 than housing that is suited more to the rural character of our town and appearance of our neighborhood. If possible, can you please let me know you see this, so that I know that can be raised to the record this evening. Elizabeth Dallas, 355 Walden Falls. Next letter is from Lisa Henderson of 6 Maplecrest Street. Dear members of the planning board, I'm writing in support of the 32-unit, age-restricted multifamily development proposed for 242 South Main Street. I reside at 6 Maplecrest Street, making me a neighbor to the project, though not a direct abutter. I spent my entire career working in affordable housing. I'm very familiar with this type of development, the highly competitive financing involved, the strict design and quality standards required, and who it will serve. With this development, Newmarket stands to gain a permanent source of affordable housing that will serve our aging population with dignity. I'm pleased our town has the foresight to identify areas well suited for this purpose. This parcel's proximity to opportunities for engagement, for example, schools, downtown businesses, and public amenities, is ideal. Too often senior housing is sited in remote areas, as if to intentionally wall off our elders from being active and visible members of our community. At the preliminary presentation in March, butters identified some legitimate questions and concerns about drainage as well as poor sight lines around the bend of Route 152. I trust that the planning board will scrutinize the findings of the wetland delineation and soils evaluation as well as traffic study and request any necessary modification to the project to uphold the public interest. Question: could the developer use pervious pavement in the parking area to help manage runoff? I appreciate the developer's interest in connecting the development with the sidewalk terminus at the elementary school to ensure safe passage across the street. Pedestrian safety is critical for seniors, residents, and school children alike. I would like to add my own concern about light pollution. My property abuts the school parking lot. I do experience light pollution from this use. I hope this can be managed better at the property. Don't share concerns that have been raised about traffic. This is a 32-unit senior housing community comprised of one-bedroom apartments. Most residents will be single-person households, and many won't have cars. For the same reason, the number of parking spaces proposed should be more than adequate to accommodate residents and guests. I have heard some residents ask for a smaller development. Having knowledge of the highly competitive financing for these types of developments, the planning board should be aware that a smaller project would be nearly impossible to finance. The strict construction standards mandated by the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program and New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority dictate that there be sufficient scale to carry these costs and still deliver on permanently affordable rents. This is not a matter of a developer trying to maximize profits. There is a formula to achieve project viability. Falling outside these boundaries can kill a project altogether. I do appreciate that by siting the building perpendicular and close to the road, the building size will be masked and the form will mimic historical development patterns. Or rather, houses sited close to the street with gable roofs and shingles. I'm confident that a thoughtful landscaping plan will provide further buffering and ensure curb appeal. I'm confident in the planning board's ability to differentiate facts and emotions and know they will work prudently with the developer to achieve a viable senior housing development that will be an asset to Newmarket. Thank you, Mr. Henderson, 68 Press Street, Newmarket. 68 Press. So, Liz, do you want me to read your letter?
If she's here, she should speak.
She's here.
You already spoke, yes, so I just want to make sure.
We'll just enter it in the record.
Oh, we enter it in the record?
Yeah,
Okay.
you don't need to read it, just,
Okay, yeah,
it'll be entered.
Yeah. That's all the comments.
Okay, is anybody else? So, please come up to the microphone, please.
It was brought up by Steve about the inventory of the buffers around the buildings. So would that be brought up to the contractor this goes through and he has to change his landscaping?
Oh, no, 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 it will be addressed well before then if we get that far.
Because if you were in the parking lot with cars coming and going, I would think they would feel like they're in prison. I would feel like I'm in prison with cars coming and going, visitors. I'd rather see trees there that are going to hide it all year long.
Understood, understood, we've got a long way to go on the landscaping, understood.
And they're gonna also have, the trash cans there, that right there, talking about also, that we're gonna have the truck. So the more trees and the more permanent trees with leaves and bushes is the better.
We're gonna work all through that, yes, absolutely.
So that really sounds like, I guess you're good to go with this.
What's that?
You're making it sound like you're.
No, no, it's one of the many items we need to work through.
That's not, so with the neighborhood, that's one of the criteria that is not fitting with us at all.
Anybody else? All right, so for the board, I guess we could ask questions. I don't know what the point is at this point. I think we have a lot to digest and whatnot, but if anybody has any questions, feel free. But other than that, I'd like to set up a TRC.
Well, a
Do you want to go
couple.
through questions?
Well, some questions, because and apologies for not asking the specific applicant, who were, at the time when you were presenting, we were thinking you were going to do your presentation and then we would get to this point for questions, so my apologies ahead of time. I'd like to ask Mr. Gold, when were the wetlands flagged? Read that on the plans.
You have to come up to the microphone, please.
I can hear you.
Okay. August of 2022.
I think Eric just
So
found it.
the wetlands were actually flagged in this April, and the map was produced in May, my soil map.
So 4/23 in
Yes.
April
Yes,
is when the wetlands were flagged?
yes.
Okay, thank you. And then, I think, again, we're dealing with some small plans here. It appears like the silt fence would be along the wetland buffer, correct?
Somebody
And-
else ought to handle that one.
All right.
I didn't put in the silt.
Okay, me, Christian. So with this, the silt fence would go in prior to any construction, correct?
Correct.
Do you see any issues with the actual construction of the building, having to work on the non-buffer side of that silt fence? It appears like it's right up adjacent to the building.
It's very close, but we have that drip edge, the stone drip edge out behind that, so.
Yeah, the stone drip edge will go in after the building's built, right?
But that gives them the buffer to create the
Okay,
concrete
so
slab.
what's the width of that?
5 feet.
So you see no issues with maintaining the silt fence?
No, and it's probably in this case gonna be either a combination of, the stone, not the stone, the, silt socks valve, which get
yeah,
driven into the ground. Because those are easier, number one, to maintain, number two, they actually do a better job at preventing erosion, because they stop the sediment on the uphill side or the upstream side, but allow the water to filter through.
Okay.
That's very likely what's gonna, and I think you'll notice that on our plans, we call it out as either silt fence or the compost
sorry,
berm.
just the
Yeah, I get you.
Do a follow-up on that, on silt socks, what type of material do you use for the silt socks? Because there could be invasives in there.
No, this is ground mulch, ground tree mulch, yeah.
Thank you. And Robbie had a few questions on the landscaping. What is the height of the 3-inch caliper trees? And fully understanding that's what our requirement,
Yep,
that's
totally.
what
Yeah,
our
it generally varies,
regulations.
you know, and I was thinking about this when the question was asked. The canopy of the tree is probably gonna be between 8 to 12 feet wide, could be as wide as 15, but at this particular tree, I think it's gonna be closer to 10 to 12. And I would guess, and this is a guess, but I can certainly call Millikens and see what there are right now, but I would guess they're about 15 feet to start.
Okay.
I would, if I can take a moment to clarify on the evergreen versus deciduous, that buffer of shrubs, which is meant to be between 3 and 5 feet tall, is alternates evergreen and deciduous. So there are evergreens continuously along in that planted buffer of shrubs, and they're meant to knock out the cars and the cars' lights.
What is the height of the berm? Are you proposing?
There is no berm. We're not.
So it's just in the planting
it's
at
just,
grade?
Yeah, it's the planting at grade. So in the front row, we've got spirea and what's the other thing that's in the front there? Ilex glabra, inkberry. Inkberry gets between 3 and 4 feet tall. In the back row, we've got incredible hydrangeas and the other, sea green junipers. Both of the hydrangeas get to be sort of this height, 4 to 5 feet, and the evergreen, the junipers get to be about 4.5 feet.
So the renderings that were presented would not be at planting?
Would not be at planting, but would the shrubs in there are not at full ground either. The trees are sort of mid-size. And I would say, I think when we talked about modeling them, I had them do them about 20 feet tall, 25 feet tall, somewhere in there.
Okay.
Obviously, when they're full grown, they're going to be a lot taller. And in fact, that row of trees, if anybody wants to see what those look like, if the Hannafords in Dover on 108, when you drive into the driveway, those trees on the right-hand side are that particular tree. They have been in place, how long has that Hannaford's been there? Maybe 10 years, Bill, you think? Yeah. And I've been watching them grow since they went in. When they went in I think they went in at 2.5, that's what Dover was at the time. And they're wonderful trees.
So there would be a continuous row of green year round.
No, the trees are deciduous trees.
Not the trees, the shrubs.
The shrubs, yes.
So there'd be a continual wall there.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they're either in the front row or the back row, and they go back and forth, right? It's not like, but.
So again, on the rendering, it appeared there was no landscaping directly in front of the actual building, the street end.
Yeah,
Did I miss that?
There is on the end. You can see it on that plan right there. There's a row of inkberry right at the face of the.
Yeah, so to the right of that, it's just lawn. There's
Correct.
nothing buffering the front of that end, that gable end.
The shrub line is buffering more the parking, and the trees are as you're driving past, the trees work on the building. However,
the existing trees.
The existing trees are to the right, and the right of the building, those are the round circles right there.
Right. So what's buffering the end of the building? Also, the street front of the building. What is buffering the street front of the building from the street?
We've got that existing tree that's there, and we could certainly bring that buffer across in front of the building. But to be quite honest with you, I thought the end elevation of the building was quite good looking, and that's why we did a foundation planting.
I'm just going back to the regs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and we can certainly add to that.
Okay. And then in getting to the canopy of that, particularly as it's shown here?
Yes.
do you have, with the construction of the
Yes.
foundation?
We've had
is there any
multiple conversations
concerns?
about how to attack that tree. Not
The trees
attack
and the
tree.
root system?
How to build next to that tree.
Okay.
And what we would do to, how we would prune the root system ahead of time in anticipation of doing
Okay.
the building. It is close to the building. We would be impacting those roots. And so rather than getting there with an excavator and just do this,
Yep.
you know how that happens? If you go in and root prune them, it's a cleaner way of building next to a tree.
And you've done that on other projects?
Yes, we have.
And what's the, you know, what's been the outcome
There's
of that?
there's never a guarantee when you're constructing around trees. It is our best effort to save that tree. We want to save that tree.
It's a great tree.
Yeah.
Both of them. Those are my questions. Oh, was there any solar proposed? I mean, I think there was a comment about the heat pumps potentially. Was any solar proposed? But
Hi,
not that
Da-
anyone's against solar. It's just a question.
Hi, David Lemieux, developer. There will be a solar element to the project.
Rooftop?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Those
Does anybody
are-
have any
those are
other-
my questions.
Yeah, I have
Couple
one
quick-
follow-up question about the appraisal or yeah. So it sounded like you looked at Dover and Rochester and Durham, but there was nothing you could compare in any of our adjoining towns, which I believe would be Epping, Lee, or Newfields. You're saying there's no comparison for any properties there that you could find? In other words, there's no properties like this in any of the adjoining towns other than Durham?
Well, I also looked at the Wadley Falls here in Newmarket, sorry.
Right.
And the assessor here said there was nothing that he was aware of right in town.
Right. I was just, because Dover and Rochester really aren't, I don't feel like comparable to this community. Those are cities,
Yeah.
I mean, of considerable size. So people would have different expectations about what they would see around them. And like the gentleman said who sold his house,
Right.
you know, there was a disclosure on there that this could be built and that could, you know, so that was my only question is like it sounds like what you're saying is there are no other projects like this in any other adjoining town other than Durham.
No, my guess is that there would be, but when I did my analysis, I started here from, Newmarket, and then worked my way, asked around, where's another property, talked to another assessor, got to Durham,
Yeah.
Dover properties, there's some in Rochester. There may very well be some south of here, west of here, but those are the ones that, I was referred to and followed up on.
Okay, because that would be what I would look for. I mean, to be convinced, honestly, that's what I would be looking at, would be show me comparable buildings in comparable places to Newmarket, which I think would be the adjoining towns. Like whether it's Epping or Lee or Newfields or Durham is one, but even further Stratham or something that is similar to our town. I don't feel like Rochester and Dover are in any way similar to our town, and that wouldn't give us the information we need to know how this truly would affect this single-family neighborhood that's predominantly single-family, in Newmarket.
Well,
That's just
there are different towns, but they're very similar in the fact that what they were, what type of use, and the surrounding areas that they directly went into. They were mixed-use neighborhoods or residential neighborhoods. So in that respect, different town, but very similar comparisons.
You mean Dover and Rochester?
No, I'm saying if you look at where those buildings went in and the surrounding areas and what the impact was, that's where the comparison is apples to apples. I mean, I understand. Ideally, they would all be here in Newmarket or in smaller towns, but I wasn't able to find any of those.
I think to your point, Patrick, so you take Baghdad Woods, right, in Durham, which is in a residential area. So the question is, the single-family residential units that are in that area, did their values go up or down because of Baghdad Woods? Or Riverwood's first phase in Exeter, there's a very large single-family housing development that is adjacent to that, sharing the same road in. The question is, because of Riverwoods being there, this bigger building and the traffic, et cetera, are the properties within that neighborhood valued less than go up the street in a similar neighborhood? So I think that's what Brian was trying to address. It's, you know, it's the impact of the value of that, to your point, to the neighborhood directly abutting
Right.
those.
And I was just looking for something that was, I feel, more
100% agree.
comparable.
Yeah.
Understood.
Yeah.
Is Jeffrey Dirk still here? Jeffrey, could you come up for a minute? I've got a couple questions for you, please. It's a great night for you, isn't it?
Yeah, that's all right.
The first question I had was the site driveway and Grant Road. Did you don't have any heartache over that being that close together?
Well, so what I would say is we'll take a look at the spacing. The original driveway location, when I had seen it, was when the building was rotated differently. So the driveway was actually almost midway between the school driveway and Grant Road.
Yeah.
So we can look at, based on the speed, what that offset is, because as you know, the offset based on the speed. So we can take a look at that and see if it meets what the requirements would be for the 40 miles an hour.
Okay, I appreciate that. The other question, and somebody brought it up, but I don't remember who, one of the residents. There's a note on the plan, and I don't know whether this is actually going to be for you or Christian. It says existing vegetation restricting 400-foot sight lines to be removed, and that is certainly within the right of way.
Correct.
So if that were to happen, my understanding is that the owner would be required to maintain that yearly. You would have to work with DPW. The town certainly is not going to go mow that for them, right?
That's correct. Within our traffic study, you'll see there's a recommendation not only for vegetation removal and maintenance, but also the same with respect to any snow piles that may be located within the site triangle area. So I think, you know, as we would typically say, I think as shown on the plan, you want the site triangle on the plan, and then reference the condition relating to maintenance of vegetation within that area as a condition of approval by the applicant, subject to whatever approvals are needed from the town. And the same thing with removing any snow.
Right. Okay. Does anybody else have any traffic-related issues at this, questions at this point? Thank you.
Thank you.
Any board members have any other questions at this point?
I'm sorry, just maybe two very quick questions, I promise. When we talk about the solar, will there be a rectifier and batteries on site?
Oh, yep, excuse me. Yep. Please come up to the microphone.
The solar will be roof mounted, and it's gets fed actually back into the grid, and you get credits for that.
Okay, so you're, I'll lack a better way of saying it, distributing the power.
That's correct.
Okay. Next question is regarding generators. Where would those generators be located?
It's actually not a generator. You mean the panels themselves?
No. So if you're, for lack of a better way of saying, selling or distributing the solar energy out, okay, you're not keeping that. You're not going to power the building with your own, because if you were, you'd need a rectifier and a battery.
Yeah, Mihal might be able to speak to the solar portion a little bit better than me, because it gets fed back. We do retain some, and the balance gets put back into the grid, and all the equipment's located within the building, except for the panels are on the roof. Does that clarify?
That's correct, Dave. You basically said it all. The inverters, as I understand that's called, it sits within the building, and that is the only interior part of the installation. Everything else sits on the top of the roof, and everything else is basically just a bunch of solar panels in the form of an array and a conduit. Then it gets fed back to the grid through the inverter that typically sits in the electrical room. Very common.
I'm sorry, I'm going to ask you to speak up. I'm sorry, I'm
Sure.
old.
The inverter
Yeah.
is the only interior part of the system, as everything else through the photovoltaic array sits on top of the roof.
Right.
And the inverter is what converts the power drawn from the photovoltaic, gets it back to the grid. So the only external parts visible on the building will be the photovoltaic array. The rest of the installation will live within the building.
Okay, so when we talk 35 feet, and help me with this if I'm saying this incorrectly, the 35 feet is the building,
Correct.
and then you're gonna have the solar panels on top of it. Are they multi-mode panels, or are they single mode, meaning they're gonna capture lighting from the bottom and capture it up? Because if you are, they're gonna be tilted.
That's not the intent. The intent is to keep the solar panels flat along the
So
roof
you're
like you normally
using
do.
single mode.
Single
fine.
mode,
You're
yes.
Single mode, you're not using multi-mode panels,
Correct.
correct?
And I'm not a great fan of the multi-mode, especially sitting on the building, because
Yeah,
they might be
I'm not a
lifted by the
big fan of
building.
them either, so.
It's basically a sail.
Alright, so I just wanna make sure that when we talk about the height of the building, you're saying it's 35 feet, and the 35 feet includes the stuff on top of the building, and that is enclosing all 35 feet.
That's my understanding, and
We'd
I'm
have
not
to see
recalling
that.
the.
Okay, that's what, I just.
Yes.
I'm not
that's what I
recalling our
asked.
section exactly, but I'm pretty sure we are below 35 feet.
Okay,
We
ju-
wouldn't be on the dot or close.
Alright,
So there
and-
is still space.
Okay, and then the last question, I promise, is, when I look at the floor plans, I don't see a kitchen, or are they like, are you having a dining room, for lack of a better way of saying it?
A common room. Certainly.
So you're gonna have a kitchen facility that will be making meals for people? Okay.
The idea. Go ahead.
So the common space would have a kitchenette so that
Okay.
the residents can all have a shared area. So there wouldn't be a cooking facility within that space, but each unit has their own kitchen.
That's what I wanted to
and
make sure.
eating.
I
Yes,
just wanna
and
make
it's,
sure I
yep,
understood
a
that.
full
Okay.
kitchen for each
All right,
unit.
thank you.
Yep.
Maybe Deborah, so if you're going with, if the proposal would potentially be going with external mechanical components, do you have a concern of where they would be located, given how close everything is to the buffers? Or would they be building mounted? Maybe haven't, gone that far down, but.
The heat pump type of system that we're proposing to use is all located within the building for the heating and cooling.
But the outside component?
Yeah, it actually is, it's a through-the-wall, it's called an Epoca unit that's made in Italy.
Oh, for each unit?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So each unit has its own small heat
That's
pump?
correct.
Nothing's ground-based?
Correct.
It's all through wall?
Yep.
And I have just one question, actually not for you, Dave, just for the architects, I guess. Would you, what I have in front of me shows floors 1 and 2. We don't have any floor plans for the 3rd floor. Could you make sure we get those?
Sure.
Please.
Yeah, the
Yep.
third floor is the same as the second, essentially.
Okay.
But we can certainly.
Just label it that way or
Yeah,
whatever. Okay,
we'll get
thank
that
you.
to
Any other questions? All right, so here's what I would like to do. We need to set up a TRC.
How about when do you want to do a site walk?
Well, let's talk about TRC first.
You want to get through TRC first?
No, I just want to set up a TRC. I want to get
Okay.
people to volunteer.
All right.
Do we have any volunteers for a TRC?
Sounds like you volunteer.
You volunteer?
Yep.
How many volunteers do you need, Eric?
It's good to have 3, but if we
Three,
have
not
2,
4.
that's fine. We can't have 4, 2 or 3.
Okay, I'll volunteer.
All right, that's 2.
You should be on it, okay?
I'll volunteer then.
Good.
Let us get through this for a minute, please, okay? Yeah. All right, so
So which one was it?
So
Was
me-
it you, Val? Oh,
No.
Eric?
me, Patrick,
And
and Jane.
Okay.
So Bart, we can, do you want to talk with?
I want to talk with all the relevant parties.
Yes,
But
just
I
get-
want to try to split 3 July. I'll be in touch with.
Yes, okay, all right. So, in that end, I'd like to schedule a site walk. When do we want to schedule a site walk? you wanna send everybody an email tomorrow? Send us all an email, and just get some times from everybody, if you don't know now.
And but you have to give public notice of the
Right.
site walk.
Yes. It'll probably be a Saturday morning, I would guess.
Mhm.
All right. Hey, I'm on the TRC, you better come down on
Yeah.
Saturday.
Well, it's light enough too
I'll
in the
pick you up,
evening.
Art, don't worry.
We can do evening
Yeah, we
during
can
the
do
week.
evening too, I don't care.
Because it's light
Whatever,
enough.
Whatever, that works too, whatever.
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
Nope, whatever works for everyone, so.
Okay.
But how much public notice do you need?
I would like a few days at least.
What do we
The-
legally do?
What do we legally need for public notice?
48 hours?
Yeah, I think,
Would the lawyer in the room happen to know that?
he's 24.
He doesn't have his hearing aid in.
Right here, you're satisfied.
No, for a site walk, we need to notify, we need to do, how much notice do we need to give people? Public notice.
Your scheduling it here is sufficient for a notice of
If we
sidewalk.
schedule it here.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, okay.
Not scheduling it by email tomorrow or something, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think we should pick a date.
All right. Hold on a minute.
I apologize, I normally wouldn't be texting, but I have a CO monitor going off on a property.
Mhm.
My wife doesn't know what to do. I apologize, it's, fire department's on its way.
So I will just throw this out there. Next Monday night,
17th.
17th, 5 o'clock? Does that work?
Mhm.
Does that work for
Somebody.
you guys on your ends, Christian? I think Christian probably needs to be there.
Sounds good.
Nope. Tuesday night? Monday the 24th. That works for me.
Mhm.
Does that work for everybody else?
I won't be here.
Okay, everybody else?
I'll be out
can
of town that last week in
Okay.
July.
Can everybody else make it?
But you'll be on the TRC, so you'll.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what's going on.
Yeah.
Just can't meet the last week of July with the TRC.
That doesn't work for Bart.
Well,
What-
do we, that whole week? I don't wanna wait till August, man.
So
Would it be
what
the
was
end of the world if
Christian?
you couldn't be
Can you
there?
do it this Friday?
Someone has to take notes.
No, darn, I'm not gonna do that.
What about Friday?
That's tough. What was Christian's? What was your schedule? Just next week. Oh. And then Bart's gone the following, or not available the following week.
Well, for the sake of discussion, I was gonna say, how about the 13th?
Yeah, this
Which
week.
is this Thursday.
13th?
I can
Yeah.
do the 13th.
Thursday? Okay.
Does that work?
Perfect.
5 o'clock? If not, I'll give you
13,
right.
5 o'clock?
Yeah.
Oh,
Uh-huh.
you gotta catch the train.
What time's the last train?
Yeah, that's plenty of time.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
All right, so we're gonna do a site walk on,
We can bring you there, okay?
on Thursday the 13th, we'll do a site walk at 5 o'clock? Does that work for you, FX?
No, we were looking at Saturday the 30th.
Oh.
29th,
29th?
excuse me, apologize. Early, so we're not screwing up everyone's day.
That works for me, and that's trouble for you, Bart, but.
What time?
So like 8?
Whatever.
8:30?
Whatever you want.
You're coming the farthest.
But I-
8:30?
29th of July at 8:30 a.m.
8:30 a.m.
And Bart, I can pick you up at the train station if you want.
All right.
Okay. Either way, let me know.
So Bart, as housekeeping, do we have money for peer review? Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
We haven't.
We don't know, but we're developing the contract right now, so I should have that soon.
Sorry?
Okay, so I just asking Bart about funds for peer review.
Right.
So he'll get you guys
Get an
something.
estimate?
Yeah.
Yeah.
An estimate in the next. Oh,
The site walk date?
the 29th of July at 8:30 a.m.
Okay.
That's a Saturday. 8:30.
So, is there parking on site, or should we park at the school and walk over?
Elementary school.
Park at the
That's
school?
your closest parking, yeah,
Okay,
it's
and
probably
then-
elementary school.
Then we'll walk across 152.
Um,
Want some, put some
Okay,
temporary.
so,
We're gonna run.
One last thing before we close this for the night. Early on, Mr. Bruton had said he would like a vote tonight on the special permit. I'm not comfortable doing that tonight with the questions that have been raised.
Yep.
Just mainly on the value and neighborhood impact, potential neighborhood impact. So I've got some issues to work through there. That's how I feel. Does everybody else kind of feel? How's everybody else feel? Yeah. So we'll work through that as we go through the TRC and whatever other meetings we have here. So then we will continue this until, when do we talk about continuing?
I make a motion, we continue the application, or the public hearing on the application till August 8th.
I'm sorry, what was the date?
August 8th.
8th, thank you.
That's the second Tuesday.
Does that work for you guys on your side, Christian? And
Yeah, we're gonna be able to facilitate a TRC before then?
I hope so.
Okay.
That's the plan.
Yeah, I mean,
If not, we'll just have you continue, right? I mean,
Right.
the idea would be to get the TRC to get some feedback, so.
So Christian, we're gonna have to talk, assuming you wanna be there, so.
TRC?
So, and you're out next week?
Yeah, but August 8th is fine.
That's the.
Oh,
planning board
TRC.
meeting.
TRC.
Yes, TRC, yeah.
So we,
We'll chat up on it.
yeah, and I mean, obviously you need to come to an agreement on the
Yeah.
review fee, because that's the most, we gotta get somebody on board. Who do we use now? Do we have a list of people, or do we just use one?
We have contracted on the road.
Underwood, okay.
And is Lindsay doing all stormwater review?
Stormwater,
Oh, she does, oh, good.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, so,
I just have one question.
Yes.
Don Mesa, 35 Maple Crest. The noise
yes.
been brought up. What kind of noise level that we can expect from this building?
We'll ask
Whether-
them about that in the TRC
Okay.
process.
And then, I thought she said the third floor was attic space, but it's not?
No, it's units.
It is units.
It's what would typically be attic space, but it's units.
Okay, but it is
Yes,
units.
yes,
Okay,
yep, absolutely. All right, so, we need a motion to continue to August 8th?
I made that motion.
You made the motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Thank you all for coming. Start of a long process. Thank you.
No, Jane, I see it.
Nothing else?